Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Smith family. George Smith was born and raised in Greenwich, Connecticut. He came from a close-knit, caring family, an environment that nurtured his intelligence. His father, George Smith Sr., owned the liquor store in the town, which was not just a job, but a passion that brought him joy. George Smith pursued higher education in business at Babson College in Massachusetts and graduated in 2000. After completing his studies, he worked in Boston as a data mining analyst for several years. However, he realized that his true passion was helping his family in the business. In 2005, George made the conscious decision to return home to learn the basics of business from his family's store. His goal was to one day take over the business, allowing his parents to retire and enjoy the fruits of their labor. In 2002, at a reunion with old friends, George Smith met Jennifer. She, a Connecticut native who had just found work as an elementary school teacher, would later become his life partner. George was immediately attracted to her beautiful appearance, open personality, and strong ambition, and they quickly fell deeply in love. George's parents also welcomed Jennifer with open arms. 3 years later, in 2005, when George was 26, they decided to tie the knot and start a new life together. Their picturesque wedding ceremony was held right on the beach at the Castle Hill Inn, Newport, Rhode Island. Nai sao bui lu, cap doi moi koi de ten hong tuan trang mat xa hoa kio de 12 gay tren du Thuyen Royal Caribbean. Their journey began in Barcelona on June 29, with stops in France's Côte d'Azur and along Italy's coast. On board, George and Jennifer befriended another couple and a young man named Josh Askin from California. Josh Askin, a 20 years old with a great sense of humor, quickly became friends with George. The group had a great time together. On July 1st, when the ship docked off the Italian coast, they decided to spend the day on land. July 4th, they explored the island, wandering through the narrow streets of the old town, swimming in the crystal-clear Aegean Sea, and sampling local cuisine in quaint taverns. They were carefree and happy, enjoying each other's company and the island's beauty. The group left Mykonos with unforgettable memories and planned to continue the fun on the ship's deck that evening. After a romantic dinner, George and Jennifer rejoined their friends on the ship. The group decided to get together and enjoy a good time together, laugh and create memories of their vacation. The evening was filled with laughter and excitement. After enjoying appetizers and drinks, the newlyweds, accompanied by Josh Askin, headed to the ship Ciaschino to continue the fun. George and Josh Askin spent their evening enjoying a game of craps, while Jennifer had fun playing poker at a nearby table. As the night came to a close, the newlyweds had lost a substantial amount of money, but they joked about it lightheartedly, unbothered by their losses. After the Ciaschino closed, they decided to keep the party going. Later, around 2:30 a.m. on June 5, 2005, security cameras on the Greek island of Mykonos caught footage of George leaving the Ciaschino, but it remains unclear whether he returned to his cabin afterwards. George Smith, a 26-year-old newlywed, is on his honeymoon with his wife Jennifer. They is having a fantastic time together, soaking up the lively atmosphere and entertainment on board. However, their enjoyable evening suddenly takes a mysterious turn. Upon investigating the incident, the ship's captain searched George's cabin, finding unusual footprints under the window, as well as evidence of a disturbance on deck. George was missing, and footprints at the scene suggested there may have been a struggle, raising doubts about George's safety. The sudden disappearance of the newlywed couple spread quickly, causing passengers on the ship to become worried and scared. The crew cordoned off Deck 7 and restricted access to cabins while they searched for George and Jennifer. After finding blood, it was presumed that they had vanished under mysterious circumstances. The senior officer took charge of the investigation and went to their stateroom to gather more information. Based on the evidence, it was suspected that George might have fallen overboard. Meanwhile, the search for they continued on the other side of the ship. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found in a ship spa, where she was receiving a pre-booked massage. She looked surprised and worried, claiming she had no idea where her husband was and hadn't seen him since the previous night. According to Jennifer, she woke up and found George not there, but she thought he was with friends or in another cabin. She then went to her spa appointment without giving his absence the second thought. At noon, Turkish authorities boarded the ship to investigate the disappearance of George. The captain reassured passengers that the investigation was necessary to understand what happened and hoped it would end quickly. The police began by questioning George's wife, Jennifer, who was visibly agitated and seemed to have limited information about her husband's disappearance. Jennifer told the police that she had last seen George the previous night and that Royal Caribbean staff had informed her that he may have fallen overboard. The discovery of blood on the boat's awning suggests that something terrible has happened to George. As a result, Jennifer became the main suspect due to her agitated state and apparent lack of knowledge about her husband's disappearance. The investigators then examined cabin 962, which was found to be in disarray, suggesting a possible struggle. In the bathroom, they discovered small drops of blood on the carpet and towel, as well as fingerprints on the balcony railing. Furthermore, 2 small blood stains, each approximately 2 centimeters long, were found on the bedding. The blood samples were later identified as belonging to George. George's disappearance from the cabin remains a mystery, and all evidence points to the fact that he experienced trauma before he disappeared. A chair on the balcony, positioned to allow someone to sit next to the railing, caught the investigators' attention. Marks on the railing suggested someone had indeed sat there, sparking suspicion that George might have fallen. However, the high railing and bloodstains on the boat's awning and inside the cabin hinted at a more sinister scenario: murder. Investigators have been trying to determine who George was with that night, and what may have led to his disappearance. The inquiry was in its early stages, but it was already clear that the case was complex and fraught with mysteries. The Turkish authorities boarded the ship to investigate George Smith's disappearance. They began by questioning the group of friends with whom the newlyweds had spent the previous night. As the investigation remained shrouded in mystery, every detail was crucial. They reported that George and Jennifer had consumed excessive alcohol, leading to George's intoxication. They claimed to have helped him back to the cabin, put him to bed, and removed his shoes before leaving him alone. However, they were unable to account for Jennifer's whereabouts and assumed she had returned to the cabin later. Notably, Josh Askin's testimony contained inconsistencies. He alleged that Jennifer had left the group to go with a casino employee named Lloyd, contradicting the assumption that she had returned to the cabin. Josh Askin and Jennifer have deep feelings for each other, and they have both openly expressed their feelings for George. However, when reviewing the security footage, the story is different. At 3:30 a.m., the footage showed Jennifer leaving with new friends, while George stayed behind. Furthermore, data from Lloyd's key card indicated that he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m., a fact confirmed by his girlfriend. This new information raised more questions and led investigators to suspect that Josh Askin may have been hiding some crucial details. As the investigation continues, each new revelation added more mystery to the story. On a different part of the ship, a young man named Greg Rosenberg was enjoying a family cruise with friends, including his cousin Zach Rosenberg and close friend Rostislav Kaufman. The 3 men, who all held American passports despite their Russian heritage, lived in New York City. Greg Rosenberg and Jennifer had started their evening at the casino, trying their luck at poker together. After the casino closed at 2:30 a.m., they joined their friends and decided to continue the party. The group headed to the ship's disco, where they danced and drank together, enjoying each other's company. Lloyd Bota, the casino manager, was also seen having a good time with the young men. The witnesses' accounts of the nighttime activities start to conflict with one another as the group members disperse to their cabins. It was already late, and they were visibly intoxicated. According to the ship's rules, passengers who were loud and behaved inappropriately would have their drink delivery blocked. When the staff refused to serve the drunk visitors, they remembered they had a bottle of absinthe they had bought on the island of Mykonos. However, the crew had forbidden passengers from consuming their own alcohol on board. Josh Askin returned to his cabin to retrieve a special bottle of wormwood wine that he said he had purchased earlier. It was later discovered that this absinthe was exceptionally strong, with an alcohol concentration of over 70%, making it one of the strongest drinks available. George decided to help his friend by hiding the bottle of absinthe in his shorts. However, an observant janitor noticed something unusual. A group of young men, including Greg, Zach, Rostislav, Josh Askin, and George, were drinking from the bottle. This incident was added to the investigation. That evening, not only the men were intoxicated. Jennifer, at first very alert and calm, then showed signs of intoxication. She began to stagger and at one point, leaned on Lloyd, the casino manager. Some thought she was trying to regain her balance, while others interpreted it as flirting. What happened next between Jennifer and George remains unclear. According to eyewitness accounts, they got into an argument, but it's unknown if they were joking or serious. At some point, Jennifer hit George, and it's unclear if it was playful or out of anger. Jennifer left the disco around 3:30 a.m., visibly intoxicated and stumbling. George stayed behind with his new friends. The staff's testimony was crucial in uncovering what happened next. Jennifer's unsteady walk caught the attention of the janitor, who had seen her and her friends drinking earlier. He helped her to the elevator and watched her turn right when she reached her deck. However, this is where the story takes a confusing turn. Her stateroom was on the left, but she headed in the opposite direction. Jennifer was found asleep in a hallway far from her room. 2 guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to return her to her quarters. When they arrived, the clock read 4:52 a.m. But her husband George was not there. The curtains on the balcony doors were closed tightly and remained still despite the breeze, raising questions about whether George had gone out to the balcony on his own after his friends left him in bed. Deputy Chief of Police Chit Hyman and his wife were in a neighboring cabin. They were awakened at 4 a.m. by a noise and heard loud sounds coming from George's stateroom, number 9062. Chit Hyman reported the noise to guest services and also yelled through the wall to try to quiet the disturbance. The noise stopped briefly, but then loud talking resumed for about 3 minutes. An argument on the balcony followed, during which someone said, "Good night," repeatedly, as if trying to make people leave. After that, there were sounds of furniture being moved, and finally a loud thud, like something had fallen. Chit Hyman decided to investigate a disturbance and opened the door to find 3 unidentified men. Other passengers also reported hearing a loud noise that sounded like a body hitting the boat's canopy, followed by a woman's scream. However, none of the eyewitnesses had conclusive evidence that a woman was inside the cabin at the time. According to witnesses, 4 young men entered the cabin, but only 3 of them were visible when they exited. This raised the question of whether one of them might have stayed inside to search for money from the newlywed couple, who had recently won a significant amount at the casino. The theory of a failed robbery attempt seems plausible, but there are inconsistencies in the alibis of the 3 boys, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav. They claimed to have been in another stateroom just minutes after Hyman saw the 3 unknown men. The key card records for George's stateroom confirm that they entered it at 4:05 a.m., but there is no record of them entering the cabin again. This has led to several theories about what might have happened to George Smith. Another theory suggests that George and Jennifer's drunkenness was not simply due to excessive alcohol consumption. Although they appeared relatively sober when they left the casino at 2:30 a.m., they were unable to return to their cabin on their own by 3:30 a.m., implying possible exposure to illicit substances. This idea is supported by the testimony of other casino visitors, who reported that George and Jennifer openly discussed having large sums of money, possibly from wedding gifts or casino winnings. Estimates of their wealth varied, but all witnesses agreed it was in the tens of thousands of dollars. The fact that George wore an expensive Breitling watch and Jennifer owned a valuable engagement ring further suggested they were wealthy. It's possible that their quarters were targeted by thieves searching for the money they had been boasting about. Two possible explanations have been proposed for the disappearance of George. The first theory suggests that the kidnapper may have injured George while trying to remove his valuable watch, resulting in bloodstains on the sheet. The second theory focuses on the effects of alcohol and hallucinogens. After discovering that the passengers had been drinking and finding footprints on the balcony, the captain suspected that an accidental fall overboard might have occurred during a scuffle. Particular attention has been paid to hallucinations caused by drinking wormwood wine, a beverage containing the active ingredient thujone. However, toxicology experts note that the concentration of thujone plays a crucial role in determining its effects. Importantly, absinthe sold in European countries today is strictly regulated, and the thujone concentration is limited to such a low level that it is incapable of causing hallucinations. The fact that the George actually purchased the wormwood wine in Europe makes it unlikely that it caused the hallucinations, as experts claim that the amount of alcohol required to produce such hallucinations would have to be extremely large. In reality, only black market absinthe with a much higher concentration could potentially cause hallucinations. In the investigation into George Smith's disappearance, the FBI conducted polygraph interviews with Jennifer and Lloyd Bota, and who both passed. However, Josh Askin failed the polygraph, which may suggest that he is hiding something about George's disappearance. The investigation into George's mysterious death uncovered a significant piece of evidence, a videotape featuring 3 individuals, including Russians, making jokes about an incident. The FBI agents reviewed this tape, and a particular comment made by one of the men, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," suggests a potential connection to George's case. During the investigation in 2009, FBI agents interviewed Greg, Zach, Rostislav, and Josh Askin as witnesses. However, Zach Rosenberg and Josh Askin declined to provide a direct answer. Their answers remained vague, implying that they did not want to share full details of what happened. Another crucial witness was Greg Rosenberg, who was with the group of men entertaining on the night of the incident. He claimed they ordered food to their cabin that evening, providing a possible alibi for the Russian men. Nevertheless, inconsistencies were found in this statement. However, this information is incorrect. According to the ship's service records, their cabin was blocked from service that day. Staff were also specifically instructed not to serve the group that evening. Greg could not confidently say which passenger in the cabin had ordered food. Witnesses offered differing opinions on the nature of George and Jennifer's relationship, citing various observations and recollections. Greg believed it was challenging to gauge the quality of their relationship due to the group's heavy drinking. According to him, everyone in the group was extremely intoxicated, making it hard to determine the specifics of their interactions. There was a discrepancy in testimony as to whether Greg left the cabin immediately after ordering food. Josh Askin provided information that Greg left the cabin after ordering food. However, Greg denied this statement, saying that he never left. This contradiction complicated the investigation, requiring further investigation to establish the facts. In December 2019, Greg Rosenberg was murdered, and the case remains unsolved. Investigators are exploring a potential connection between his death and that of George Smith. The mysterious circumstances surrounding George Smith's appearance have raised significant questions about his background and family. As details emerged, the situation grew increasingly complicated, with the actions of his relatives following the tragedy drawing scrutiny from both the public and law enforcement. The George family persisted in seeking answers and justice regarding George's disappearance. The case was moved from the FBI's Connecticut office to the New York office. The family offered a $100,000 reward for any information that could help identify and bring to justice those responsible for the crime. They also called for a boycott of the shipping company, which they believed was trying to cover up the incident to protect its profits. The incident also strained the relationship between George's parents and his young wife, Jennifer. Her behavior was closely scrutinized and many found her composure suspicious. She said she was acting on the orders of FBI agents, doing exactly as they told her. However, her hesitation to provide more information sparked suspicion. The George family, who were seeking truth and justice, became disheartened when Jennifer agreed to a $1 million settlement offer from the judgment company. This move appeared to them as a betrayal. They felt the Turkish authorities' investigation lacked transparency, and Jennifer seemed too hasty in accepting the offer, fueling their suspicions that she was concealing information and wasn't invested in uncovering the truth. In contrast, Jennifer says she has very few memories of what happened after 2:30 a.m. that night, unaware that the liner's staff had even found her in the corridor and escorted her back to her cabin. This satisfied with the Turkish investigation. The George family to take matters into their own hands by engaging independent forensic scientist Henry Lee to assist them. Henry Lee conducted a series of studies in the cabin and on the balcony that were not included in the official investigation. These studies could have revealed crucial information about the events surrounding George's death and potentially confirmed one of their main theories: murder or accident. According to Henry Lee, the height of the balcony makes it unclear whether George's fall was an accident or not. It is possible that a third party pushed him or that he was in a state of insanity and climbed onto a chair before falling. Henry Lee had planned to conduct an experiment to simulate a fall from the balcony, but the cruise line owner refused to allow it. George's relatives believe that this decision was made to obstruct their efforts to uncover the truth. Henry Lee also conducted investigations in the cabin, on the balcony, and on the boat, but the results of these investigations were not made public. Meanwhile, the FBI launched its own investigation, but many of its findings and discoveries were kept secret. The FBI's investigation into George Smith's disappearance focused on 4 young men who spent the night with him, as well as 3 Russians, Greg, Zach Rosenberg, and Rostislav Kaufman. However, their testimonies were inconsistent with those of other witnesses, adding to the mystery and confusion surrounding the case. Initially, Jennifer was a suspect, but she was eventually cleared of suspicion. The family then increased the amount of their lawsuit against the company and used the payout to secure the release of the investigation's results, including witness statements and other relevant information. Jennifer was left to cherish the memories of George and dedicated herself to charitable work in his honor. She later remarried, continuing to strive to make a positive impact in his memory. The FBI launched an extensive investigation into George Smith's disappearance, but it was ultimately unable to uncover the truth about his fate or recover his body. Due to lack of evidence, the case was eventually closed, and his death was officially classified as an accident. George's family continues to seek answers about the circumstances surrounding his death, and not being able to visit his grave and pay their respects is the greatest suffering for them. They remain hopeful that the truth will eventually come to light, bringing closure to the case. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kimberly Antonakis. Kimberly Antonakis was born in 1974 in New York, USA. She was the only child in the family. Despite the fact that she grew up in love and affluence, she was not pampered. Her parents came from simple families. Nevertheless, her father Thomas managed to achieve considerable heights. He created his own company, which was engaged in computers, earned funds. The man was happy to spend on his favorite daughter and her desires. When Kimberly was a little girl, her parents divorced. The child was left to live with her mother. However, this did not weaken the connection between the little girl and her father. He took her on weekends and spent all his free time with her. When Kimberly's mother found a new man and decided to move to Florida, she faced a choice to stay with her mother or with her father. Since she didn't want to move, the young lady decided to live with her father. Kimberly was very close to her father and enjoyed living with him. As she grew up, she became a well-behaved, sociable child and eventually a stunning young woman with a radiant smile that always lifted her spirits. She had a great sense of humor and a positive attitude. Kimberly was raised in a sheltered environment, surrounded by love and care, which protected her from the harsh realities of life. As a result, she only saw the good in people and was largely unaware of the darker aspects of life. Unfortunately, her open and kind nature would eventually lead to many sorrows. In 1994, Kimberly enrolled at the College of Staten Island. Shortly after, she told her father that she felt ready to live on her own. Although Mr. Kimberly was worried about her decision, he respected her independence and decided not to oppose it. He promised himself that he would do his best to ensure her safety and well-being in her new living arrangements. Kimberly bought a nice apartment for his daughter, located in a wealthy area of the city, and installed an alarm system to ensure her safety. He also purchased a parking space in the garage across the street so she wouldn't have to park far away. To stay in touch, he provided her with a cell phone and a pager. Kimberly did everything in his power to ensure his daughter's well-being. His concerns for her safety were well-founded, given his wealth and her limited life experience. Kimberly was a diligent student who also worked part-time as an accountant at a reputable firm. She had declined her father's offer to join the family business, opting instead to forge her own path. Kimberly led a typical student life, attending parties and socializing with friends. She declined her father's offers to return home, wanting to maintain independence. This led to an unexpected situation when she let friend Liz Pace and her family stay while their apartment was being renovated in early 1995. Kimberly, with a kind heart, invited young people to her lodging. They spent days having fun together. One day, Kimberly and a friend attended a party, getting ready and dressing up. After a fun night of dancing, Kimberly drove them home but didn't go up, citing unfinished business. They hugged goodbye, unaware they'd never see each other again. After visiting the police, Mr. Kimberly's father, went to the parking lot next to her house, only to find that her car was missing from the garage. As he looked around, he spotted a shiny object on the floor near the wall, a small gold earring. He recalled giving his daughter similar earrings and, just in case, picked it up. However, Kimberly was nowhere to be found in the apartment. Instead, he met her guests, including a friend, her boyfriend Joshua Torres, and their 2-year-old child. Although Kimberly was aware of Kimberly's decision, he didn't agree with it. The tenants were worried about the hostess's absence and Joshua offered to help find her. He said he was looking for Kimberly and would assist later. Kimberly returned to the police station, explaining that his daughter had been in an accident, but the officers remained unconvinced. Kimberly decided to speak with Liz Pace, the last person to see Kimberly, and showed her the jewelry he had found. Liz Pace confirmed that she had seen Kimberly wearing those earrings on the night she disappeared. Kimberly then visited the places his daughter frequently went to, talking to many people, but didn't gather any significant information. Joshua suggested searching not only for Kimberly but also for her distinctive car. Kimberly went to the police station for the 3rd time, insisting that he wouldn't leave until they began a search. A detective eventually responded to his appeal, agreeing to take on the investigation despite the usual protocol. To better understand the events surrounding Kimberly Antonakis' disappearance, investigators started by reconstructing her activities on February 28. Kimberly began the day by attending college, followed by a few hours of work. After work, she returned home and had dinner with friends before heading out to a party with a friend named Liz Pace. The evening concluded with their return home around 4 a.m. Following her return, Kimberly went to the parking lot for reasons that remain unclear. Both her apartment and garage were thoroughly searched, but no signs of struggle or foreign fingerprints were found. This lack of evidence suggested either a meticulous cleanup or that any potential intruder may have worn gloves. The most puzzling aspect was the disappearance of Kimberly and her car without any trace, except for a single earring that was found. An analysis of Kimberly's bank account revealed that her last transaction occurred the evening before she vanished, ruling out the possibility that she had run away from home. Based on the evidence, detectives hypothesized that Kimberly was likely kidnapped. The investigation expanded to include additional police officers. Due to the lack of concrete leads, law enforcement considered information from a psychic. Witness interviews began with Liz Pace and Joshua. They revealed 65 calls were made from Kimberly's landline on March 1st. Joshua explained he made these calls to locate Kimberly, who was like a little sister to him. Liz Pace's testimony helped determine Kimberly's clothing and a portrait was created, highlighting her distinctive tattoos, including a scorpion and infinity sign. Meanwhile, a search for the missing car was underway, with checks at scrap metal collection points and other locations where the vehicle might be found. Unfortunately, no positive results were obtained. A check of Kimberly's cell phone was also unsuccessful. Police advised Kimberly to pay attention to any letters or phone calls he received, as they might be from Kimberly's kidnappers demanding a ransom. The Kimberly family remained in a state of uncertainty until March 4th. At approximately 2 a.m., emergency services responded to a reported fire at a large, abandoned house located at 86 Woodhaven Avenue in Queens. Multiple fire crews battled the blaze until it was finally extinguished. Upon investigation, a charred body was discovered in the basement of the building. Further analysis by forensic experts revealed the deceased was a woman between 20 to 25 years old, with remnants of long, black hair still intact. There were also signs of tape and evidence that her legs had been bound, with her hands tied behind her back. The most disturbing aspect, however, was that she was alive at the time of the fire, as indicated by the presence of smoke in her lungs. Detectives initially suspected that the body might belong to Kimberly, a missing person. To confirm the identity, dental records were required. Meanwhile, an inspection of the ashes and the air revealed the scent of gasoline, strongly suggesting that the fire had been intentionally set to destroy evidence of a serious crime. Despite the absence of other evidence, the charred body remained, and upon closer examination, specialists found tattoos matching the description of the missing woman. The records from the dental clinic supported the investigation's suspicions, leading to the discovery of Kimberly Antonakis' body. As more details emerged, an eyewitness came forward who often walked his dog in the area. The dog had been acting strangely in the days prior to the fire, appearing nervous and barking at the house for no apparent reason. It wasn't until after the fire and the discovery of the body that the cause of the dog's behavior became clear. She had attempted to escape and called for help, but her cries went unheard by humans. However, the dog's acute hearing allowed it to detect the sounds coming from the basement, explaining its unusual behavior. When questioned by officers, the homeowner revealed that he had visited the building multiple times in recent days. He was trying to sell the house and would regularly check on its condition, collect mail, and pick up receipts. However, he only inspected the house from the outside and never went into the basement. The homeowner claimed he never heard any suspicious noises, and if he had, he would have investigated. Investigators decided to re-question Joshua, as they had some reservations about him. They also found it strangely coincidental that his name started with the letter J. This time, Joshua mentioned a person he hadn't been able to contact the day Kimberly went missing, a young man nicknamed Psycho, a Russian national who had previously dated Kimberly. The detectives looked into this new information and discovered that the Russian had moved to the US with his parents at a young age. As he grew older, he became involved with a gang and had a history of breaking the law. This led to the identification of the first suspect, who was soon taken into custody. During interrogation, Psycho was informed of his former lover's death, but his reaction shocked the detectives. The young man not only denied involvement in the crime, but he also showed genuine emotional distress. Investigators took him to the crime scene to observe his behavior, and it became clear to everyone that they had the wrong person in custody. Later, his alibi was confirmed, leaving the investigation at a standstill once again. The victim's family sought the psychic's help again. This time, she claimed to have seen 4 people involved in the crime. According to her, the kidnappers had initially intended to establish communication but failed. The kidnapping didn't seem to have been planned with a tragic outcome. The psychic concluded that new information would emerge soon. A couple of days later, Mr. Kimberly, hoping to gather some leads, announced a $10,000 reward for information that could help catch the perpetrator. Mr. Kimberly couldn't shake off the psychic's words. He pondered the psychic's statement about the kidnappers wanting to make contact. What could that mean, and what had prevented them from doing so? Upon returning home, he sat at the table and stared at his phone for a while. He suddenly recalled a minor detail from the day Kimberly went missing. He had listened to all the answering machine recordings as he had been expecting his girl to contact him. However, there were no messages, except for 2 blank ones with complete silence. He initially thought it was a technical issue or a problem with the connection. But it later became clear that this was not the case. 5 days after her body was found, the police located her car in a quiet area of town, not far from where her body was discovered. The investigators were hoping to find fingerprints in the car, but it had been thoroughly cleaned. The only evidence they found was her hair and a second earring in the passenger compartment. Although it seemed like a breakthrough, it didn't lead anywhere. Kimberly, her father, was linked to a local mob hit due to his wealth and success. However, detectives found no evidence to support the rumors. Kimberly, grieving the loss of his daughter, denied any involvement and was found to conduct his business openly and honestly. In July 1995, a burglary suspect was arrested at a New York City residence. Surprisingly, he shared information about the Kimberly case. The suspect claimed an acquaintance told him that his friends had kidnapped and killed she by burning her. Upon hearing the unidentified man's name, the officers pieced together the crime. The man in question was Joshua Torres, Kimberly's roommate who had participated in the search for her. Detectives took a closer look at the young man, calling him in for further questioning. Although he denied any involvement in the crime, a lengthy conversation revealed a potentially incriminating statement. He mentioned that if he were the kidnapper, he would have fed the victim Kimberly. This statement raised suspicions since there had been no public mention of the victim's hunger, thirst, or cold, and not even her father was aware of these details. To strengthen their case, investigators examined the suspect's past, finding a criminal record and a pattern of obsessive behavior. He was jobless and financially dependent on his roommate, caring for her child, which gave him unmonitored time to plan the crime. Knowing Kimberly's daily routine allowed him to abduct her and hide her in a vacant house. It was unclear why no ransom demands were made. Analyzing the suspect's calls revealed he lied about contacting Kimberly's acquaintances. The dialed numbers belonged to random individuals with no connection to Kimberly. Suspicious messages on his pager further implicated the suspect, Joshua. He had long been a suspect in the eyes of detectives, and they finally gathered enough evidence to arrest him. During the interrogation, they informed him that Kimberly's ex-boyfriend was no longer considered a suspect. Pressed for more information, Torres revealed that he suspected his friends of being responsible for her murder. Torres claimed that he thought his friends only intended to kidnap Kimberly for ransom and then release her unharmed. He admitted to being an accessory to the kidnapping but maintained that he did not think his friends would resort to violence. According to Torres, the plan was to demand a ransom and then let Kimberly go, but things did not go as planned. The kidnappers became frustrated when their ransom demands were met with silence from Mr. Kimberly. Unbeknownst to them, their calls had been answered by Kimberly's father, and a ransom message had even been recorded. However, due to a technical issue, the recording was not saved on the answering machine. The kidnappers, feeling ignored and angered by the lack of response, decided to wait and see how events would unfold. It turns out the group feared public attention, and the psychics claim that the suspect's name began with the letter J. This information was published and broadcast on TV, creating a cycle of events. Joshua was released on bail after speaking with the police, but then disappeared. Around the same time, Jose was shot while walking with his wife. Jose's wife later told investigators that her husband didn't trust Joshua and had been gathering evidence against him. She claimed Jose felt guilty about kidnapping Kimberly but not about the house fire. He wanted to confess to the police, just as he had to her. The pager messages and suspect statements helped investigators piece together the kidnapping and crime details. 4 men were involved: Joshua, Julio Negrin, Jose Negrin, and Nicholas Brett, also known as Jay. Notably, Julio had previously dated Kimberly and proposed, but she rejected him. The group was united by friendship and a shared criminal past. However, their actions were far surpassed by the horrific treatment of she at the hands of the guys. Nicholas had recently been released on bail, thanks to his mother's intervention, and had received a lenient fine for a crime that could have resulted in a prison sentence of over a year. Joshua had a history of serious offenses, including child abduction, violence against a minor, and illegal possession of weapons, despite his young age. Nevertheless, he too had received an inappropriately light sentence for his crimes. It was evident that Joshua was the ringleader, responsible for coordinating the group's actions. After Kimberly left the party, the men seized her in the parking lot, having apparently been stalking her and waiting for the ideal moment to strike when she was alone. A gun was used to intimidate Kimberly. When she resisted, the perpetrators tied her hands and covered her mouth, eyes, and ears with duct tape. They then put her in the trunk of a car and drove her to an abandoned house, where she was taken to the basement and tied to a chair. To prevent her from making noise, they removed her shoes. The kidnappers told Kimberly that her father owed them money and that she would be released once he paid the debt. Julio was tasked with caring for Kimberly, bringing her food and water twice a day, and keeping her warm. However, fearing the consequences, Julio abandoned the house, leaving Kimberly without food, water, or warmth for 3 days. Once Julio left, the kidnappers informed Joshua, who made an audio recording demanding a ransom of $775,000. Then, the kidnapper called Kimberly's father, leaving 2 empty messages. The kidnappers waited for a response, genuinely confused as to why Kimberly's father didn't contact them. Meanwhile, Kimberly, left unattended, suffered from dehydration, passing out multiple times, yet continued to fight for her life. The kidnappers grew angry and fearful of being caught due to the lack of ransom payment, so they decided to release Kimberly. Upon entering the basement, they found her unconscious and assumed she was dead. To eliminate evidence in the hostage, they planned to get rid of her. During the investigation, officers learned from Liz Pace that Joshua used his roommate as an alibi, directing his accomplices while staying at home with his child. Liz Pace initially claimed she was unaware of Joshua's involvement in Kimberly's kidnapping. However, at the trial, she testified against him. She stated that after being interrogated, Joshua approached her and confessed to all his crimes. However, he then turned violent, physically assaulting her, silencing her, and issuing death threats before fleeing. Some time later, Joshua was apprehended by law enforcement. In an effort to further the investigation, the authorities decided to bring the former friends together, informing them that Joshua had denied any involvement in the massacre. Upon learning of Joshua's denial, Julio chose to cooperate with the investigation, revealing crucial information. This cooperation played a pivotal role in securing Torres' conviction for Kimberly's murder. Ultimately, the trio faced charges of murder, arson, kidnapping, and unlawful imprisonment. During the trial, evidence emerged that Joshua had made repeated attempts to deceive investigators and evade punishment. After deliberating for approximately 10 hours, the jury reached a verdict. Joshua Torres was sentenced to 58 years in prison. Nicholas Brett received the same sentence as the others. Julio Negrin was found guilty of being an accessory after the fact and was sentenced to 2 to 6 years in prison. Tomas Kimberly, the victim's family member, was satisfied with the court's verdict and did not want the perpetrators to receive the death penalty. In his opinion, the death penalty would have been too lenient a punishment. Nicholas Brett was repeatedly abused and assaulted in prison and died of AIDS after serving 2 years. Julio Negrin was released after serving his 2-year sentence. Joshua will not be eligible for release until 2053 at the earliest. Tragically, sadly, Kimberly's father, Kimberly, passed away from cancer in 2005. His family believes that the stress and grief caused by his daughter's death contributed to his illness. The life of Kimberly Antonakis, a beautiful young girl, was cut short in a shocking and devastating manner. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Abril Perez Sagayan. Abril Perez Sagayan was born in 1971 in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico. Her mother, Maria del Socorro, worked diligently 7 days a week to ensure her 3 children, Abril, Javier, and Anna, had the opportunity for the best possible education and a bright future. Even at a young age, Abril displayed an exceptional aptitude for science and made it her goal to pursue higher education and financial independence. As Abril matured, she embodied a unique combination of intelligence, compassion, and physical beauty. Her sociable nature and innate leadership qualities made her an inspiration to her friends and a standout professional in her field. She earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Nuevo León and a master's degree in business from the Monterrey Institute of Technology. As Abril's career progressed, she discovered her passion for digital sales and rapidly climbed the ranks. She attained a prominent position as an executive director at Bilbao Bank in the United States. During the early 1990s, a time when Abril's professional accomplishments were flourishing, she met Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez. Juan Carlos was an ambitious entrepreneur, born on November 11, 1968. Juan Carlos and Abril discovered they had a lot in common. Both had attended the Monterrey Institute of Science and Technology, where Abril studied and Juan Carlos earned his degree with high academic achievement. Juan Carlos had also studied at top U.S. universities, including the University of Pennsylvania and Harvard. With his education and experience, he considered himself a professional entrepreneur in e-commerce and financial technology. Juan and Abril became inseparable, collaborating on projects and socializing in the same friend circle. As time passed, their friendship blossomed into romance. After a few years of dating, they decided to tie the knot, and their wedding took place in 1994. Their collaboration led to numerous successful projects, including the online stores Pag Mobile and Plascom. They also played a key role in the development of the Dem store, which became a leading e-commerce platform in Mexico. By 1999, their life appeared to be a perfect fairy tale, with both partners achieving great success in their careers and enjoying a happy relationship. Their joy was further amplified with the birth of their first child, Anna Cecilia, in 2001. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Juan Carlos Jr., followed by another son, Julio Andres, in 2005. Despite their busy schedules, Abril prioritized her children's needs, taking care of them personally and attending their school activities. Abril's devotion earned her the respect and admiration of those around her. Juan Carlos was also a dedicated father, and together they created a seemingly ideal family that many people envied. However, behind the facade, the family was struggling with difficulties, and all members suffered due to Juan's short temper. Juan was a cruel man who frequently lashed out at anyone who crossed his path. His behavior towards his wife, Abril, began with verbal abuse, making her feel uncomfortable and hurt with his insulting words. Over time, the situation worsened, and Juan started using physical violence against Abril, regularly beating her. Abril attempted to conceal the abuse from her friends and family, fearing that she wouldn't be able to provide for their children on her own. She believed that staying with Juan would give their children a better future. However, by 2009, the situation had become so severe that others began to suspect what was happening in the family. Abril has always kept it a secret from her friends and family, but whenever they asked about a possible divorce, she insisted that she wouldn't leave Juan. By 2014, Juan had reached the pinnacle of his career, becoming a prominent figure in Amazon's retail industry in Mexico. A year later, when Juan became the director of Amazon in Mexico, the family had to relocate to Mexico City. Abril hoped that the change of scenery would resolve their problems, but unfortunately, the abuse continued. Juan Carlos presented himself as a loving husband and father to the public, but behind closed doors, he was abusive and controlling towards his wife, Abril. He would often post on social media about how much he loved her, but in reality, he was constantly accusing her of cheating and even hired a private investigator to gather evidence. Despite his successful career, which included becoming the director of e-commerce at a multinational company, his marriage was deteriorating. The tension between him and Abril became unbearable, and after a trip to Monterrey to celebrate Christmas with her family, she realized she couldn't stay in the marriage any longer. During the trip, Juan's anger boiled over, and he physically attacked Abril, grabbing her by the neck and strangling her. He had received a photo from the private investigator of Abril with a male colleague, which he mistakenly believed was her lover. In reality, the man was just a coworker. Abril decided not to engage with Juan's accusations and instead filed for divorce on January 4, 2019. They had already separated and planned to inform their children about their impending divorce. However, the situation took a violent turn one early morning. Abril was asleep when she was suddenly struck on the head with a baseball bat by her partner, Juan. Initially disoriented, Abril thought the ceiling had collapsed, but as her vision cleared, she saw Juan standing over her. She attempted to push him away and escape, but he overpowered her, prompting her to scream for help. Their 16-year-old son rushed to his mother's aid, quickly assessing the situation and intervening to prevent Juan from causing further harm. He managed to get Abril away from Juan and escorted her out of the house to seek emergency medical attention for her injuries. After the incident, Juan took to social media to share his side of the story. He made several posts claiming that Abril had been unfaithful, stolen his money, and wasted 26 years of his life. He also alleged that Abril had physically attacked him, stabbing him in the chest with a knife. To support his claims, he attached photos of the knife and what appeared to be bloodstains. One of Juan's friends responded by recording a video asking people to share the information. However, Juan's posts became increasingly bizarre. At one point, he even posted a message claiming that Abril had taken her life, despite being clearly alive. This move remains puzzling to this day. Meanwhile, Abril had been recovering in the hospital. After her discharge, she immediately filed a police report against her husband. The authorities sided with her, granting her custody of their 2 children and ordering Juan to pay 6,000 Mexican pesos, approximately $1,350, in monthly alimony. However, this amount was deemed insufficient to cover the costs of raising their 2 minors. After overcoming her initial fear and financial struggles, Abril began a new chapter in her life, driven by her determination to create a better future for her children. She relocated to Monterrey with her kids, where she attended Juan Carlos' trial and filed for divorce. Reflecting on her traumatic experience and the abuse she suffered, Abril reevaluated her life. She joined a Christian organization that supported families and started working as a divorce counselor. Her ultimate goal was to establish a support system for women who had endured similar abuse, just as she had. As Abril worked towards rebuilding her life, the court proceedings against Juan Carlos continued. 9 months after the attack, Juan was formally charged with attempted murder. The case was then brought to court, where Judge Federico Mask ordered Juan's informal arrest. Consequently, Juan was incarcerated for several weeks. Juan appealed the verdict, and on November 3, 2019, Judge Hector Jimenez reviewed the case. He found the hospital photographs and Abril's testimony, along with that of her son, insufficient to prove Juan's guilt. The judge also believed that if Juan had intended to kill Abril, he would have done so. Additionally, he considered the baseball bat used in the attack to be a blunt object, rather than a deadly weapon. As a result, the charges were downgraded, and the preliminary arrest was cancelled. With only a few hearings remaining, the outcome of the case was uncertain, causing Abril and her loved one significant anxiety and frustration. In a desperate attempt to have her concerns heard, Abril wrote to the judge, expressing her fears for her life and pleading for him to consider the threat Juan posed. However, her letter was ignored. Juan then began a custody battle for their children. Abril was forced to leave Monterrey and travel to Mexico City for the remaining hearings. She also had to subject her children to psychological evaluations, as Juan had claimed in his lawsuit that Abril had manipulated them into rejecting him. A week before a critical court hearing, Abril sat down with her 3 children to express her love and wishes for their future. She encouraged them to chase their dreams and find the strength to forgive their father. This conversation seemed like a farewell, as if Abril sensed that it might be her last opportunity to reassure her children of her love. On November 25, 2019, Abril followed her ex-husband's instructions to avoid potential legal issues that could have led to her separation from her children. She traveled to Mexico City, coincidentally on the same day that thousands of women marched in the streets to commemorate the International Day Against Gender-Based Violence on March 19, 2021. The court reclassified a case involving violence against Abril, which occurred in January 2019, as attempted murder. This decision was made after Abril's relatives and the prosecutor filed several petitions for judicial review, ultimately leading to the cancellation of the original decision. 2 months later, on May 23, the remaining suspects in Abril's murder case were apprehended, including 3 women and 1 man. The investigation resulted in the issuance of 3 search warrants and 8 arrest warrants. During the first search, 48-year-old Amanda Vicente Rodriguez was taken into custody. A series of arrests were made in connection with a recent crime. In the Jardín de Morelos colony, 34-year-old Mabel Montelier Morena and 48-year-old Garcia Alicia Flores Valdez were taken into custody, and their mobile phones were seized. Another arrest was made in the Alvar Aragon colony in Mexico City, where 50-year-old Isa Jalil Castillo, also known as Aguirre or Alvar's godmother, was detained. At the same time, 9 gang members were apprehended, with 7 of them allegedly linked to the Abril case. However, one suspect, Juan Carlos, remained at large, prompting authorities to reissue a warrant for his arrest. General Prosecutor Ernesto Godoy explained that the initial warrant was for attempted murder, while the new one was for the actual killing of a woman. Despite efforts to locate Juan, he remained elusive. In a surprising turn of events, a man named Rolf, also known as El Chalón, contacted the authorities and claimed to have information about the case. During questioning, he revealed that he was the one who had actually pulled the trigger and taken Abril's life. The perpetrator, Rodolfo Daniel Bendis, eventually pleaded guilty to the crime. He claimed that Juan Carlos had promised to pay him $10,000 to carry out the crime. According to Bendis, Juan Carlos had contacted him while he was in pre-trial detention and provided him with the address of Abril in Mexico City. Juan Carlos allegedly instructed Bendis to spy on Abril and provided written instructions on how to commit the crime. He also promised to provide Bendis with a gun in Monterrey. However, when Bendis arrived in Monterrey, no one contacted him, and he did not receive the gun. He returned to Mexico City and did not hear from Juan Carlos again until after his release from prison. Upon his release, Juan Carlos contacted Bendis again and informed him that the plan had changed. He now wanted Abril to be killed in Mexico City, as he had managed to lure her there. The case was divided into multiple hearings due to the complexity of the judicial system. The first trial began in August 2022, with Bendis and Juan Carlos as the initial defendants. During this trial, the prosecution presented 28 witness statements and 14 pieces of expert evidence. During the recent trial, a key defendant known as El Shang Galán testified about his role in planning and committing the crime of feminicide, for which he had previously pleaded guilty. On May 19, 2023, the court delivered its verdict, finding Rodolfo Danielo Baza and Juan Carlos Rodriguez guilty and sentencing them to 52 years in prison. Additionally, they were ordered to pay approximately 56,000 Mexican pesos, $30,000 US, in damages. Following the trial, the men were taken to a detention center to begin serving their sentences. However, the Abril family immediately announced their intention to appeal the verdict, as they believed the sentence was too lenient. They pointed out that Rodolfo was the one who fired the fatal shots. As for the remaining defendants, it was previously decided in October 2014 that their trials would be divided. This decision was met with an appeal from prosecutors, who argued that it would significantly delay the proceedings and result in unnecessary additional costs for the court. The tragic case of Abril continues to affect her family and the wider Mexican society, and despite the recent verdict, the trials are not yet over. After the court hearing, Abril got into a car with her children and their lawyer. She asked the lawyer to drive them to the airport for their flight back to Monterrey. En route, they stopped at an intersection, where a motorcyclist pulled up beside them. The motorcyclist, who was actually a hired assassin, shot Abril multiple times in the head. Luckily, her children, who were seated in the back, escaped serious harm. One child, who was lying down, was grazed by a bullet but suffered only minor injury. Abril was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life. Despite their efforts, she succumbed to her injuries 6 hours later. The lawyer immediately contacted Abril's family to inform them of the tragedy. Her brother Javier traveled to Mexico City to handle the aftermath of the incident. The community suspected Juan Carlos of being involved in the crime, but the authorities took a different stance. Since the shooter's identity and motives were unknown, they couldn't classify the case as femicide and make an arrest. Instead, the case was initially treated as a murder, and the police launched an investigation to gather evidence that could potentially prove it was a femicide. Abril's friend took to social media to accuse Juan Carlos, but her account was deleted as a result. Abril's family was fearful that the perpetrator would go unpunished and sought to raise public awareness about the case through social media. The fact that Abril died on a day dedicated to fighting gender-based violence added a deeper significance to her death. The family organized protests and marches to demand justice for Abril. Following Abril's tragic death, social media erupted in outrage as people realized that she had repeatedly expressed her fear of her abuser, only to be ignored by the authorities. Her family and friends held a funeral mass at the Benito Flores Chapel in Monterey, where dozens gathered to pay their respects and demand justice for Abril. The funeral procession then proceeded to the Pantheon Garden in Los Angeles, where Abril was laid to rest. Her case has sparked widespread attention to the issue of gender-based violence, particularly in cases where judges release men who have attacked women. Abril's ex-husband, Juan Carlos, was released from prison after appealing his sentence, and was able to track Abril down to Mexico City, where he ultimately took her life. In response to Abril's case, the Mexican General Prosecutor's Office has launched an investigation into the judges who allowed Juan Carlos to be released from prison. The judges in question, Carlos Trillo Rodriguez, Federico Mosa Gonzalez, and Hector Jimenez Lopez, are being investigated for their roles in Juan Carlos' release. Additionally, representatives of the party of former Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador are calling for Judge Mosa's removal from office, citing his involvement in a previous controversial case in which he released a doctor who had disrespected a patient in a public hospital. The judge initially declined to charge Juan Carlos with femicide, instead only charging him with sexual violence, after which he was released from custody. During the public outcry surrounding the Abril case, Rafael Guerra, the president of the Supreme Court of Mexico City, suspended all judges involved in the case on November 29. Mexico City's head of government, Claudia Sheinbaum, stated that the government would investigate Abril's death. She also warned that the judges involved in the case could be held accountable for Abril's death if it was proven that Juan Carlos was responsible. Local and international media reported that Juan Carlos was released despite evidence against him. Abril's family established a non-profit organization called The Voice of Abril to provide support to victims of violence, including information, psychological assistance, and legal aid. The public demonstrations sparked by Abril's death prompted the prosecutor's office to reclassify the case against Juan Carlos, seeking to prosecute him for attempted murder, which could result in his imprisonment. After being charged, Juan Carlos took to social media to claim that he wanted justice for the crime against Abril and that the perpetrator should be punished. He also stated that he was willing to cooperate with the police, despite having a troubled marriage with Abril, and he would never have wanted her to meet such a tragic end. However, his post sparked widespread discontent among the community. His 18-year-old daughter, Ana Cecilia, publicly spoke out against her father, accusing him of physically and mentally abusing her, her siblings, and Abril over the years. She shared disturbing photos of Abril's injuries after being attacked with a baseball bat. Ana described her father as a narcissistic sociopath who allegedly bribed his way out of prison. During the ongoing investigation and protests, an arrest warrant was issued for Juan Carlos, but it was not directly related to the Abril case. Instead, it was due to him violating judicial duties. Although he was released on the condition that he would check in with the police station weekly, he failed to do so. After missing 2 court hearings, Judge Agustin Monra Gasper Cannell was left with no choice but to issue the order. Juan wrote a letter claiming he feared for his life and did not want to attend the hearings, stating he and his family had received death threats since Abril's death. He believed someone would seek revenge if he appeared in court. However, the judge rejected this excuse and issued an arrest warrant, also restricting Juan from leaving the country. The investigation continued, aiming to uncover the truth. A letter from Juan was discovered, in which he again denied involvement in Abril's death, claiming he never intended to harm her. He described the night of the incident, stating that Abril had initiated a fight, stabbing him in the side, and he had hit her with a bat in self-defense. The letter sparked outrage among those who heard it, with no one believing Juan's account. The investigation has revealed that Juan Carlos is the primary suspect in the case. Further investigation by the police has identified at least 7 other individuals involved in the crime against Abril. This conclusion was reached after reviewing surveillance footage from the area where the events occurred. The footage shows 2 cars following Abril as she left the courthouse. The drivers of these cars were in contact with the perpetrator who fatally shot Abril. After the attack, the perpetrator and their cars fled the scene. Although the identities of the pursuers were not yet known at the time, the investigation suggested that Juan Carlos may have been involved in the crime. According to investigators, Juan Carlos likely met these individuals while he was in prison and paid one of them to protect him. After his associates were released from prison, Juan Carlos was also released. He then paid them to kill Abril. Notably, Juan Carlos was the only one who knew Abril's route to Mexico City, as he had requested to meet her. After the shocking details of the case became public, no law firm was willing to defend the suspect, Juan Carlos. Meanwhile, Abril's loved ones and colleagues cooperated fully with law enforcement, providing any information that could aid in his capture. However, sources from the General Prosecutor's Office soon revealed that Juan Carlos had managed to flee Mexico by crossing the border into the United States. Mexican authorities swiftly alerted Interpol, which launched a global manhunt for Juan Carlos. As a result, he became a wanted man in over 151 countries, with authorities determined to apprehend him at all costs. By the end of January 2024, the case had gone cold, with no new leads or updates. 4 years have passed since Abril's tragic death, yet the true perpetrators remain unpunished. Her children are now living with her family on the outskirts of Mexico City, holding on to the hope that justice will eventually be served. The question on everyone's mind remains, where is Juan Carlos? His capture is still the top priority for the authorities. Abril's family has vowed to continue fighting for justice until Juan Carlos is found and brought to justice. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ashley Wadsworth. Ashley Wadsworth was born on July 25, 2002, in Vernon Township, British Columbia, Canada. She was the daughter of Kenneth Wadsworth and Christy Jenden, and had an older sister named Haley. The Wadsworth family was large and close-knit, consisting of over 50 people, including cousins, uncles, and aunts of varying degrees of kinship, all living in the same community. Ashley was a cheerful, outgoing, and energetic girl who was popular and had many friends. She enjoyed outdoor activities such as swimming, horseback riding, and skiing. She was also passionate about tennis and played the clarinet. Ashley was very active on social media, frequently sharing memes, jokes, and photos. It was through social media that Ashley met Jack Seppel in 2015, when she was 12 years old and he was 15. Jack Seppel was born on January 9, 1999. His mother, Tracy Dalton, was married to a man named Ricky. Jack's relationship with his father, who passed away in 2019, was reportedly strained. Jack did not communicate with his brother, Jordan, but he did stay in touch with his sister, Nadia. Apart from his mother and sister, Jack did not have many close relationships, preferring to interact with people primarily through the internet and video games. According to Jack's acquaintances, he had a mixed reputation in school. On the one hand, he was remembered as a charming, fun, and lively kid. On the other hand, they recalled his dark side, which emerged when he became angry and displayed aggressive behavior towards himself and others. A mutual friend introduced Jack to Ashley through social media, a common way for teenagers to meet and form virtual friendships. As their online relationship grew, Ashley and Jack became close virtual friends. At the time, Ashley didn't have a smartphone and used her family's computer to access social media, so her family was aware of her friendship with Jack. During their long-distance friendship, Jack had relationships with other girls, and Ashley also had typical teenage experiences. Although they occasionally stopped communicating, their connection never completely faded, and they continued to stay in touch over the years. As they grew older, Ashley and Jack's relationship evolved. They started communicating through video calls, which led to a more intimate and romantic relationship. Jack became a familiar figure to Ashley's family, who would often greet him warmly when they saw him talking to the guys. He also sent Ashley gifts, such as teddy bears and purses, on multiple occasions. Ashley's family and friends noticed that she had a tendency to compare every boy she met to Jack. However, due to the significant time difference between their locations, Jack lived in Essex, while Ashley was in Vernon. They struggled to find time to talk, often waking up too early and going to bed too late. As Ashley turned 15 in 2018, she began to express a desire to meet Jack in person. However, her family refused to let her travel alone to another continent. Like many young couples, they occasionally argued, and when Ashley would block Jack on social media during these fights, he would find ways to contact her again, creating new accounts or sending messages through his sister or acquaintances. This behavior was seen as disturbing and intrusive by Ashley's loved ones, but she continued to insist that Jack was a kind and compassionate person. In October 2018, Jack, who was 19 at the time, got a tattoo of Ashley's name on his arm when she was just 16. Her parents thought this display of affection was excessive and warned her to be cautious. However, Jack soon began exhibiting jealous and violent behavior. He would become angry if he suspected Ashley was talking to other guys, despite continuing to date other girls himself. He claimed Ashley was his favorite and swore his loyalty to her alone. This incident marked the beginning of a disturbing pattern of behavior. Ashley's friends and family grew increasingly concerned as Jack's behavior escalated. One day, Ashley called a friend who was at Jack's house, and he wouldn't let her leave. According to the friend who overheard the conversation, Ashley surprisingly remained calm, as if she was used to such situations. She simply asked Jack to stop being crazy. Ashley confided in her friends about the incident but didn't tell her parents. However, her friends strongly advised her to cut off all contact with Jack. Despite his history of fights and problematic behavior, Ashley and Jack continued to reconcile. At just 18 years old, Ashley had known Jack since her early teens, but she seemed unaware of the extent to which he had manipulated her from a young age. Ashley started working at fast food restaurants and department stores to save money for leisure activities. Her first purchase was a tablet, which allowed her to use social media more privately. She then began saving for a trip. During her senior year of high school, Ashley, a spiritual and inquisitive person, had a profound moment of insight after reading the Book of Mormon. This led her to start following the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Ashley graduated from Sighton High School in 2020. She wanted to experience university life fully, so she decided to take a year-long break before continuing her studies. In the first half of 2021, Ashley continued working in saving money. In April of that year, she was baptized into Mormonism. With her newfound independence and financial stability, Ashley decided to travel to the UK to meet Jack in person and celebrate his birthday with him. Despite her parents' and friends' concerns, Ashley was determined to make the trip, as she was of legal age and had her own savings. Ashley left Canada for the UK on November 12, 2021, on a 6-month tourist visa. This was her first time leaving her homeland, and she was thrilled. The next day, November 13, 2021, Ashley met Jack in person for the first time. On the same day, Ashley updated her profile picture to a photo of them together. At 22 years old, Jack looked significantly older than Ashley, who was 19. His numerous tattoos, including those on his face, created a striking contrast with Ashley's youthful appearance. During her stay in London, Ashley lived with Jack in his house, located in a public housing estate in northwest Chelmsford. The neighborhood had a questionable reputation, but they spent time exploring the nicer areas of the city in Essex. Jack seemed like the same charming and caring person Ashley had met online, often showering her with compliments and taking romantic selfies. However, Jack's behavior was inconsistent, and he could be cruel at times. Despite being together daily, Ashley's tourist visa prevented her from working, and Jack was unemployed, relying on benefits. Occasionally, his mother Tracy, who lived nearby, provided support. Throughout her trip, Ashley regularly posted photos and updates on social media, showcasing their happy moments and romantic experiences. The pictures often featured they embracing, highlighting their seemingly joyful relationship. Ashley kept in regular touch with her family through video calls, and everything seemed fine at first. They even adopted a new kitten, Winston, which was a positive addition to their lives. Nevertheless, over time, Jack started to become more withdrawn and isolated. Ashley's trip to England was supposed to be an exciting adventure, but it quickly turned into a restrictive and isolating experience. Her boyfriend, Jack, had lost interest in exploring the country and instead preferred to stay indoors, smoke, and play video games. As a result, Ashley's options for activities were severely limited, and she was forced to do only what Jack wanted. Before arriving in England, one of Ashley's friends from church had arranged for her to meet some American missionaries who would be in Chelmsford at the same time. Ashley was eager to connect with them, but Jack refused to let her attend church on Sundays. Despite this, she continued to secretly communicate with the missionaries through text messages, deleting the conversations to avoid Jack's suspicion. Ashley's new friends soon realized that Jack was controlling and possibly abusive. When she confided in them about her problems, Ashley admitted that she knew she deserved better, but she was trying to keep Jack happy. However, the abuse went beyond controlling her communication. About 6 weeks into their trip, Jack became violent when he discovered that Ashley had blocked 2 UK phone numbers. He mistakenly believed that the numbers belonged to other men, triggering a jealous outburst. In a disturbing text message to his mother, Jack revealed that he had physically abused Ashley. Ashley created a secret profile where she documented the bruises she had sustained. She confided in her sister Haley about the abuse, but warned her not to tell their mother, fearing that their family would turn against Jack. After Jack overdosed on anti-anxiety medication in late December 2021, Ashley was tasked with overseeing his medication as his caregiver. She kept this responsibility a secret from her mother and friends, but Haley inadvertently revealed the truth. Ashley's mother expressed concern and asked her to return home, but Ashley insisted on staying with Jack until he recovered. In early January 2022, another disturbing incident occurred. Jack smashed a beer glass over Ashley's head, leaving her in tears. While Jack forced her to clean up the broken glass, Ashley contacted her sister via video call, revealing the true extent of her situation. Jack was frantic, pacing back and forth, yelling, and grinding his teeth. His distress prompted Ashley to contact her sister, Haley, who urged her to return home. However, Haley's concerns fell on deaf ears. A brief period of calm followed, marked by Jack's 23rd birthday celebration with his family, where everyone put on a united front and pretended everything was fine. In an attempt to diffuse the tension, Jack's mother and stepfather organized a family vacation to a seaside town shortly after. The photos from the trip appeared perfect, showcasing a happy and tranquil Ashley, which brought relief to her parents, who remained unaware of the seriousness of the situation. In late January, an intense argument broke out, and Jack's behavior turned violent once again. He hit Ashley and threw a candle and a TV remote at her while she was video chatting with Haley, who was pleading with her to return home. Although Ashley had initially agreed, she ultimately decided to stay. Despite witnessing Jack's cruel nature, She clung to the hope that the charming person she once knew was still buried deep within him. Ashley was convinced that time, her love, or perhaps medical treatment could help Jack overcome his destructive tendencies, a sentiment that was echoed by her mother during subsequent conversations with Jack. Jack accused Ashley of cheating on him, physically abused her, and later apologized. Despite feeling guilty about his actions, Jack's behavior continued. The situation escalated on the morning of February 1, 2022, when Jack became angry with Ashley again. He accused her of abandoning him and seeing other people in secret. He demanded to see her phone and check her social media accounts to prove his allegations. Around 8 a.m., their neighbor Haley Borton Shaw heard Ashley's screams through the shared wall. Ashley soon showed up at Jack's doorstep, drawing attention to the distressing situation unfolding between them. Haley was shocked and Ashley appeared at her door, barefoot and crying, with a cut on her palm that was bleeding. Ashley explained that Jack had become enraged when he caught her looking at intimate photos of them. He had verbally abused her, physically attacked her, smashed her phone, and thrown her kitten against the wall. Despite Haley's concerns for Ashley's safety and fear that Jack might try to harm her, Ashley asked Haley not to call the police. Haley reluctantly agreed, but begged Ashley to see a doctor instead of returning to Jack's apartment. When Ashley refused, Haley decided to go and talk to Jack herself. During their conversation, Jack apologized for his actions and remained calm. Haley then left for a doctor's appointment around 9 a.m. Meanwhile, Jack's neighbor received a misdelivered package and brought it to his doorstep. Jack was hesitant to answer the door, which wasn't unusual since he was known to be an unfriendly and paranoid person. Around this time, Ashley called her family using Jack's cell phone, informing them of her situation. Ashley's mother was already aware of what was going on because Haley had previously confided in her about Jack's abusive behavior towards Ashley. Ashley's parents immediately bought her a return ticket for February 3rd to escape the abusive relationship. When she informed Jack, he offered to drive her to the airport. However, before she left, Ashley's mother made it clear that if Jack hurt her again, she would contact the police. She also advised Ashley to go straight to the airport if Jack assaulted her again. The conversation between Ashley and her family lasted for 3 hours before they ended the call. It was 11 a.m. in Chelmsford and 3 a.m. in Vernon when the call ended. A short time later, Jack sent a message to his mother, admitting to brutally beating Ashley again. During the assault, Ashley fell to the floor and possibly broke her arm. This violent incident occurred between 11:22 a.m. and 12:38 a.m. Ashley managed to send several messages to her family and friends using Jack's phone, but since it was nighttime, no one responded immediately. She also reached out to her friends at the church in Chelmsford, asking for help and describing the emergency. Unfortunately, these messages were not received until hours later, when it was too late to intervene. Between 12:38 and 12:45, Jack violently attacked Ashley, choking her until she lost consciousness. He then proceeded to the kitchen, retrieved an 11-centimeter knife, and repeatedly stabbed Ashley's chest and stomach around 100 times, ultimately ending her life. Following the attack, Jack updated his social media profile picture with a photo of himself and Ashley, accompanied by the caption, "Always mine." He also recorded a video message for Haley, expressing his love for Ashley, apologizing, and stating that he couldn't let her go, adding that his mental state was unstable. The video, which was never sent, showed Ashley's body next to him. Meanwhile, in Vernon, Ashley's family discovered a large number of messages from her on their phones. They immediately contacted Jamie Ashworth, a family friend from their Mormon community in Chelmsford. Jamie and Tyler Borden, another acquaintance from the church, went to Jack's apartment in England. After knocking on the door and receiving no response, they called the police and left the scene. In a desperate attempt to cover his tracks, Jack texted Ashley's family and friends, pretending to be her. However, the messages from loved ones continued to pour in, and Jack ignored them. Meanwhile, they were frantically trying to reach Ashley. Eventually, Jack called his sister Nadia and confessed to killing Ashley, even going so far as to show her the body. This disturbing conversation took place at approximately 4:13 p.m. When the police arrived at the apartment 10 minutes after Jamie's call, they found that the situation had already turned tragic. They arrested Jack, who was covered in blood, on the spot. He told the officers that he had experienced a psychotic episode and confessed to the crime. As a result, he was taken into custody and sent to Chelmsford Prison. His trial was scheduled for September 7, 2022, at Chelmsford Crown Court. The court's psychiatric examination concluded that Jack was mentally fit to stand trial. However, the evidence against him was irrefutable, including a video recording of him admitting to the crime. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, Jack immediately pleaded guilty. The judge then informed him that, given his confession, a life imprisonment sentence was inevitable. At the hearing, which took place under Judge Edward Murray at Chelmsford Crown Court, prosecutor Simon Spence detailed Jack's extensive criminal history, which dated back to his teenage years. During the hearing, Ashley's parents learned the disturbing truth about Jack. Jack had a history of run-ins with the law, including arrests for stalking, kidnapping, and violent assault. He had also been issued multiple restraining orders, including against his mother and former girlfriend. The revelation of Jack's extensive criminal record shocked and devastated Ashley's parents, who had never suspected the true nature of the man who had taken their daughter's life. During the hearing, the prosecution and defense discussed a letter written by Jack from prison, in which he apologized for his actions. The letter was later released to the media by Judge Murray, who cited the importance of transparency in the justice system. In the letter, Jack expressed regret to Ashley's family, especially her mother and sister Haley, acknowledging that nothing could undo the harm he had caused. Jack accepted responsibility for his actions and acknowledged that his mental state contributed to the tragedy. He also claimed to have previously discussed his mental health with Ashley. Ultimately, Jack was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 23 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jassy Correa. Jassy Correa was born in Praia, Cabo Verde, but her family moved to the United States when she was just 3 years old. She grew up in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and Boston became her hometown. As she grew older, Jassy became a loving mother to her daughter, Gabriella. However, Jassy's personal life was marred by difficulties. Jassy's husband, Miguel Castro, physically attacked her. Despite wanting to leave him, Miguel refused to let her go and severely beat her. Jassy eventually reported the incident to the police, and Miguel was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Jassy worked as a waitress at Del Frisco, a Boston restaurant. In her free time, she enjoyed dancing and photography. She cherished moments spent with her family, friends, and daughter, Gabriella. One of her favorite activities was taking her little daughter to the park. On the evening of February 23, 2019, Jassy celebrated her birthday with friends at Venue, a nightclub in Boston's Theater District. Before heading out, she left her 2-year-old daughter with her family and got ready for a night out, wearing a new orange jumpsuit. They had spent the evening dancing and drinking champagne at a nightclub. When the club closed, Jassy and her 2 friends stepped outside, but they eventually went their separate ways, leaving Jassy alone. She never made it home that night, and her phone was turned off, with all calls going straight to voicemail. For 2 days, Sunday and Monday, there was no news from Jassy. No one had seen her since she left the nightclub on Sunday morning. On Tuesday, February 26th, Jassy's father, Juan Correa, and one of Jassie's friends went to the police station to report her disappearance. The police immediately launched an investigation. The detectives' first priority was to determine where Jassie went after leaving the nightclub. Jassie's family and friends distributed flyers around the city, hoping someone might have information about her whereabouts. The detectives also interviewed Jassie's friends who were with her that night, but they didn't know where she had gone after leaving the club. According to her friends, Jassie had planned to head home after saying goodbye. To gather more information, the police interviewed witnesses and reviewed CCTV footage from cameras inside and outside the nightclub. One recording showed Jassie on the sidewalk on Tremont Street, near the nightclub, talking to several people at 2:14 a.m. This was after she had left the club. The footage revealed that Jassie, who appeared to be intoxicated, mistakenly got into an Uber she hadn't ordered. The driver, unhappy about the mix-up, argued with her and eventually pushed her out of the vehicle. After being forced out of the car, Jassie continued to argue with the driver. That's when an unknown man approached her and took her hand, pulling her aside to talk. Despite possibly wanting to leave, Jassie was unable to free herself from his grasp. The CCTV footage showed the man, still holding Jassie's hands, pulling her closer. Eventually, Jassie left the area with him. In hindsight, it's clear that she had fallen prey to a predator who took advantage of her vulnerable state. The next camera footage showed Jassie jumping onto his back, and he carried her to his car. They drove away together. 14 minutes later, the police had many questions to answer. Who was this man, and where had he taken Jassie? Fortunately, they quickly identified the man and located his address. Louis Coleman, a 32-year-old man from a good family background, was with Jassie at the time of the incident. He had earned a master's degree in physics and had no prior record with the law. Notably, there was no information in the police database about Louis owning a car. However, his mother, a resident of California, was the owner of a 2016 red Buick, which matched the type of vehicle involved in the incident with Jassie. Louis lived in Providence, Rhode Island, about 50 miles from the venue nightclub where he was last seen with Jassie. When police arrived at his home, they found that Louis was no longer there. However, CCTV footage from inside and outside the building revealed disturbing evidence. It's worth noting that the drive from the venue club to Louis's apartment typically takes about an hour. Since Louis returned to his apartment at 4:15 a.m. on Sunday, approximately 2 hours after he was seen leaving with Jassie, it's likely that he stopped somewhere along the way. The next day, Louis sent an email to his colleague stating that he would be taking a few more days off. Based on the content of the email, it appears that Louis was trying to buy time to cover his tracks. Over the next 2 days, Louis attempted to conceal evidence of the crime. Further CCTV footage analysis sheds light on what happened to Jassie after she left with Louis. Although the police never released the initial footage due to ethical concerns, it showed Louis entering his apartment building with Jassie. FBI Special Agent Thomas Sukus described the footage as follows. Louis was seen walking from a red sedan towards the front of the building, carrying a body with long hair and orange pants. Agent Sukus believes that this footage shows Louis carrying Jassie's body into his apartment building. According to Sukus, security footage from the building's lobby reveals that at approximately 4:27 a.m., Louis entered the building carrying an unconscious or already deceased Jassie in his arms. He proceeded to the elevator and took it to the 6th floor. Notably, on February 26, the same day Jassie's father reported her disappearance to the police, Louis made a suspicious purchase at Walmart. His receipt shows he bought multiple items that raise red flags, including protective suits, duct tape, electrical tape, candles, gloves, safety goggles, a mask, and Clorox bleach. The next day, while friends and family distributed flyers with Jassie's picture, Louis made another concerning purchase at Walmart, caught on camera at 9:22 p.m. This time, he bought a large suitcase and a canister. On February 27, 2019, at around 9:58 p.m., Lewis returned to the apartment building, and video footage appears to show him carrying the newly purchased large suitcase. Further footage captures Lewis taking the suitcase from his apartment to his vehicle in the parking lot, as evidenced by a recording at 2:15 a.m. on February 28. A video shows a man, later identified as Lewis, struggling to lift a suitcase into the trunk of his car. This footage is part of a larger investigation into the disappearance of Jassy Correa, who was last seen on February 24 and was believed to be at Lewis's apartment. Between 2:44 a.m. and 4:02 a.m., Lewis was seen leaving the building multiple times, carrying various items including cardboard boxes, trash bags, a bottle of bleach, a computer tower, a laptop case, and a small duffel bag. On February 28, 2019, police obtained a search warrant for Lewis's apartment. During their search, they found several suspicious items, including 2 packages of hooded coveralls and 2 respirator masks. They also examined a sofa in the apartment, which was missing one of its 4 large cushions. Outside the apartment complex, in a dumpster, police found a collection of items that raised further suspicions. These included white trash bags, a bag containing plastic sheets, men's jeans with bleach stains, and the belt. Additional items found in the dumpster included a white nylon hooded coverall, an unfilled box of baking soda, clear safety goggles, duct tape packaging, rubbing alcohol, Walmart bags, used plastic gloves, an empty package from a car air freshener, 3 used packages of purifying charcoal, and a sponge. On the afternoon of February 28, 2019, police stopped a car driven by Lewis near Wilmington, Delaware. Officers ordered Lewis to exit the vehicle and asked if he was alone. Lewis reportedly responded by saying, "She's in the trunk." When police investigated, they found the body of Jassy wrapped in a sofa cushion cover inside a black trash bag, which was placed in a large suitcase that matched the one Lewis had taken into his apartment the previous day. Experts who inspected the car found 2 cracks on the passenger side windshield, leading police to suspect that the man had attacked Jassy inside the vehicle. As a result, Lewis was arrested and taken to a Delaware State Police barracks. During questioning, Lewis had a large bandage on the right side of his face, which he claimed was from sheet when asked about it. A forensic examination revealed that Jassy died from a combination of strangulation and blunt force trauma. Additionally, seminal fluid was found on her body, and DNA analysis matched Lewis's DNA. Prosecutors noted that Lewis's DNA was also found under Jassy's fingertips. Although the exact location of Jassy's death could not be determined, it is believed to have occurred either in the car or at Lewis's apartment. On Saturday, March 9, 2019, family and community members gathered at St. Peter's Parish in Dorchester to pay their respects to Jassy Correa. Many wore white or displayed buttons, shirts, and sweatshirts with Jassy's face and the phrase, "Justice for Jassy." Maka DeAndrade, Jassy's cousin and best friend, delivered the first eulogy, expressing the community's sadness and acceptance of Jassy's passing. DeAndrade said, "We may not understand why Jassy's life was cut short, but I have faith that her death was not in vain. I trust that God has a plan, and I have faith in that." Boston Mayor Marty Walsh addressed the crowd, vowing to work towards creating a safer world for women. He emphasized that young women should be able to go out and celebrate without fear and return home safely to their loved ones. He acknowledged the immense pain Jassy Correa's family has endured and expressed his condolences. When Correa expressed gratitude to the city and law enforcement agencies for their tireless efforts in investigating Jassy's disappearance and death. He also paid a heartfelt tribute to his daughter, saying, "Rest in paradise, my dear Jassy, rest in peace, my dear child." Lewis Coleman, the suspect, has been charged with kidnapping resulting in death, a crime that could carry the death penalty or a life sentence. However, prosecutors have announced that they will not seek capital punishment. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence, including a video of Coleman dragging Jassie's body into his apartment and his online search history following her disappearance. FBI agents reported on Lewis's online activity in the days following the alleged kidnapping. He searched for topics such as whether a person can fit inside a suitcase and how to remove a tooth that is not loose. However, Lewis's defense team has disputed the relevance of this evidence to the kidnapping charge. They argue that the prosecution's focus has been on Lewis's actions after the alleged victim's death, rather than on the kidnapping itself. Attorney David stated, "This case is not about how Lewis behaved after her death, or whether he did anything illegal or inappropriate. The government's evidence has mainly centered on these issues, but I believe they are not crucial to determining whether a kidnapping occurred." Court documents filed by the prosecution and defense provide a detailed account of the events surrounding Jassie Correia's disappearance and death. Although they sides present different versions of what happened, the documents reveal disturbing details about the circumstances leading up to Jassie's death. Prosecutors established that the defendant, Lewis, was at the same nightclub as Jassie and her friends on the night of her disappearance. However, Lewis was interacting with a different woman he had just met, not Jassie. They exchanged phone numbers and texted each other while at the club and after it closed. The prosecution and defense have presented conflicting narratives about the events that unfolded. Prosecutors argue that Jassie was not the aggressor and that Lewis deceived her into getting into his car by offering her a ride to her friend's apartment, ultimately taking her life. In contrast, the defense claims that Jassie became aggressive after being pushed out of an Uber by the driver, and that she initiated a fight with Lewis. The defense argues that the crime was a spontaneous altercation rather than a premeditated act of stalking, kidnapping, and murder. Prosecutors pointed out that the defendant's main argument was that the victim, who weighed 119 pounds, had attacked the defendant, who weighed 200 pounds. However, this claim was not convincing, especially considering that the victim's autopsy revealed the presence of multiple prohibited substances in her body, in addition to alcohol. The defense team attempted to minimize their client's involvement in the crime. Despite this, in June 2022, Lewis was found guilty of one count of kidnapping resulting in death. The defense team then filed a motion arguing that the evidence was insufficient to support the conviction, but this motion did not change the outcome of the trial. In October 2022, Lewis Coleman, 36, was sentenced to life in prison without parole for kidnapping and killing Jassie Correia. The court also ordered him to pay $60,000 in compensation to the victim's family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. Grant Hendrickson, born on September 20, 1972, in Macon, Georgia, was an outdoor enthusiast who enjoyed fishing, golf, canoeing, and camping. Like his girlfriend, he was also an active volunteer in the community, having worked at the Museum of Arts and Sciences in Macon since the age of 15. Their active lifestyles likely drew them together, according to those who knew them. Grant's girlfriend, Michelle Cartagena, was born on May 2, 1975, in Monterey, California. She was a well-rounded and talented individual. She played in her school's marching orchestra band, was the top singles tennis player, and led her school softball team. Additionally, she was a member of the National Honor Society. Outside of school, Michelle volunteered with the Red Cross and an animal welfare association, and she often visited elderly people. Her father remembered her as a caring and driven individual who aimed to pursue a career in medicine to help others and give back to society. January 3, 1995, brought a grim discovery to the typically quiet area of Juliet Lake. A passerby reported finding two lifeless bodies while walking near the lake. The local sheriff and his deputy responded to the scene, where they were met with a shocking sight. Their office was not accustomed to handling serious crimes, as fights and thefts were the norm. The deputies were not prepared for what they found: a white Honda parked on the lake's shore, with the body of a man inside and her body lying on the ground nearby. The cause of death was evident, even to a non-expert: both victims had been shot. The car contained the victims' personal belongings, including identification, which revealed the identities of the victims. The male victim was 22-year-old Grant Hendrickson, who was found in the driver's seat. The second victim was 19-year-old Michelle Cartagena. The police were alerted to the incident, and officers from the Major Crimes Unit, along with forensic experts, arrived at the lake. The detectives' attention was immediately drawn to Michelle's body, which was partially exposed with her skirt pulled up, suggesting a possible motive for the crime. An examination of the car revealed bullet holes, leading detectives to believe that the perpetrator had opened fire on them while they were inside. Grant was hit by 3 bullets and had no chance of survival. Michelle was shot twice and likely remained conscious as the perpetrator pulled her from the car. The position of Michelle's body, with her legs spread apart, suggested that the perpetrator may have intended to take advantage of her vulnerable state, but did not do so. Forensic experts found a substance on the inside of her thighs, which was later identified as saliva containing chewing tobacco particles. The saliva samples were sent to the lab for further analysis. During the crime scene investigation, police discovered important evidence, including bullet casings of 2 different calibers, 13.223 caliber casings and 4 9mm casings. The presence of 2 types of ammunition suggests that there may have been 2 perpetrators, each using a different weapon. The families of Grant and Michelle were shocked and stunned when they learned about the tragedy. They struggled to comprehend who could have committed such a heinous act against their children. As only children, Grant and Michelle were extremely close to their parents. They had been dating for over a year and had already made plans for their future together, including their upcoming wedding. When detectives couldn't identify any enemies or suspects through family and friends, they began investigating further. They visited Mercer University in Macon, where Grant and Michelle were classmates, to gather more information and piece together the events surrounding the tragedy. The police investigation into the deaths of Michelle and Grant was ongoing, but they had not uncovered any significant leads. Both victims were well-liked and respected at the university, with no known conflicts or enemies. Initially, detectives considered the possibility that the killer might have been a man who had romantic feelings for Michelle and was rejected, but this theory was not substantiated and was eventually set aside. A visit to Mercer University did not yield any useful information for the police. However, by reconstructing the events of January 2nd, the detectives learned that Michelle and Grant had gone to a restaurant, followed by a movie. After the film, they headed to a holiday camp at Juliet Lake. The camp was open to the public 24/7 and featured a boat launch, parking area, small dock, and picnic tables. Since it was a free public space, there was no staff or security present on the night of the crime. Other people were in the area, but they did not report anything suspicious. Some individuals did hear loud noises, which they initially dismissed as firecrackers. A witness reported seeing a 1980s Honda CRX speeding out of the parking lot. Meanwhile, investigators found a DNA sample in saliva on Michelle's thigh. However, at the time, DNA technology was still in its early stages. The DNA Identification Act, which allowed the FBI to create a national DNA database, was not passed until 1994. As a result, there was no database to compare the DNA sample to, and it could only be matched by directly comparing it to the perpetrator's DNA. The investigation also included questioning staff at the restaurant and cinema that Grant and Michelle visited before their deaths, but nothing suspicious was found. The authorities considered the possibility that they might have been random victims or had a chance encounter with someone who became violent. The detectives found no evidence of any other motives, as they had good grades, no connections to shady individuals, and did not use illicit substances. The fact that the perpetrator left behind valuables, including money, suggests that the motive behind the crime was not financial gain, but rather something else. Forensic analysis revealed that the likely weapons used in the crime were an AR-15 rifle and a 9mm Ruger pistol. Despite questioning over 100 individuals and collecting DNA samples from several dozen potential suspects, the investigation had stalled. More than a year and a half after the crime, Agent Randy Upton of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation took over the case in the fall of 1996. Randy adopted a new approach, shifting his focus from identifying the perpetrator to locating the weapon used in the crime. He visited the largest gun store in Macon and requested a list of customers who had purchased an AR-15 rifle between 1985 and 1995. Investigator Randy started contacting individuals on the list of 108 potential suspects. He explained to them that cooperating by allowing their weapon to be inspected and providing a DNA sample would greatly aid the investigation. Most of the people Randy spoke with agreed to comply, which led to the experts conducting further tests. As a result, the list of suspects began to dwindle. On November 27, 1996, Randy contacted Andrew Allen Cook, a 22-year-old who was on the list. During their conversation, Randy informed Andrew of the purpose of the call and asked permission to examine his rifle. However, Andrew claimed he no longer owned the rifle, stating that he had sold it in April 1994, nearly a year before the victims, Grant and Michelle, died. Nonetheless, gun store records showed that this was not possible, as Andrew had actually purchased the rifle in August 1994. Agent Randy became suspicious when Andrew lied to him. When Randy asked Andrew for a DNA sample, Andrew claimed he needed to discuss it with his father, simultaneously an FBI agent, before complying. Instead, Andrew hung up. This evasive behavior made Randy think that Andrew might be the person he was searching for. Investigations revealed that 5 months after Grant and Michelle's murders in 1995, Andrew pawned his rifle at a local gun store. Additionally, in December 1993, someone had bought a Ruger pistol on Andrew's behalf because he was underage at the time. Andrews sold this pistol to a friend in July 1995, shortly after pawning his rifle. This sequence of events suggested that Andrew's decision to get rid of both his rifle and pistol within 6 months of the murders was unlikely to be a coincidence. As the police gathered more information about Andrew, they became increasingly confident that they were on the right track. Further investigation revealed that Andrew had not only disposed of his firearms but also his 1987 Honda CRX, which matched the description of a car seen near the crime scene. Agent Randy decided to visit the diaper factory where Andrew worked. Although Andrew was absent, Randy spoke with one of his coworkers. A colleague of Andrew's reported that they had recently discussed the worst things they had ever done, and Andrew claimed to have shot someone with a rifle. The colleague was skeptical but asked Andrew why he had done it, and Andrew replied that he wanted to see if he could get away with it. The colleague also mentioned that Andrew was a frequent user of chewing tobacco. Another friend testified that Andrew had told him in late November 1996 that he needed to leave town because things were getting hot. These coincidences caught the attention of Agent Randy, who began searching for Andrew Cook, who had not lived with his parents for several years. On December 4, 1996, Agent Randy met with Andrew's father, John, who was also an FBI agent with 29 years of experience. Agent Randy explained that he was investigating the crime at Juliet Lake and wanted to speak with Andrew, but couldn't find him. John was familiar with the case of Grant and Michelle from the news, but had not been involved in the investigation. He told Agent Randy that he didn't consider Andrew a suspect, but promised to find him and talk to him. Later that day, John was able to reach Andrew by phone. John Cook's world was turned upside down when his son, Andrew, revealed a shocking truth. A detective had been searching for Andrew in connection with a crime at Juliet Lake, and John had asked his son if he knew anything about it. Andrew's response was devastating. "Daddy, I'm not telling you. You're one of them, you're a cop." John's next question was laced with hope that his son would deny any involvement. "Were you the one who did the shooting?" he asked. After a brief pause, Andrew confirmed his worst fears, saying yes. Andrew explained that he had been fishing at Juliet Lake on the night of the incident. A couple had arrived, and he had gotten into an argument with the driver, Grant. According to Andrew, Grant had threatened him with a pistol, prompting Andrew to grab his rifle and commit an irreversible act. John urged his son to turn himself in to the authorities, but Andrew refused, saying he would rather disappear. John was stunned by his son's confession, but he maintained his professional composure. The next day, he visited the Monroe County Sheriff's Office and reported his son's confession. At the time, no one was aware that Andrew had been arrested earlier that morning in a nearby county for illegally hunting deer in Turkey. He had given a false name, but his true identity was quickly discovered by Agent Randy. Randy then traveled to Jones County to speak with Andrew. Unbeknownst to Randy, Andrew had already confessed everything to his father the day before. When Randy arrived at the Jones County Sheriff's Office, he introduced himself and asked Andrew if he would be willing to answer a few questions. Andrew responded, "It's been 2 years, and you still don't have any evidence. I used to own a Honda, a rifle, and a Ruger, but now you're just trying to frame me." Andrew told the sheriff that if they helped his father get a lawyer, he would reveal the entire truth. After being transferred to Monroe County, Andrew's father, John, was allowed a private conversation with him. When John hugged his son, both men broke down in tears. Andrew confessed to his father that he wasn't at the lake to fish on the night of the crime. Instead, he claimed to have arrived after the victims, Grant and Michelle, were already there. Andrew's story went that he had fired multiple shots from his rifle, then used his pistol to fire additional shots. He then pulled Michelle's body out of the car in an attempt to mislead the police. As an extra precaution, Andrew spat on Michelle to prevent the police from linking him to the crime through saliva analysis. Andrew was subsequently charged with the murders of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. The police gathered additional evidence to support his confession, including tracing the ownership of the rifle and pistol used in the crime. Forensic examination of the guns confirmed that they were indeed the ones used to kill Michelle and Grant. Andrew Cook's DNA was matched to the saliva found on Michelle's body, further implicating him in the crime. The trial took place in 1998, during which John Andrew, Andrew's father, spoke and apologized to the families of the victims, Grant and Michelle. He acknowledged that his apologies would not bring them peace and expressed regret for not recognizing the evil that had consumed his son. Andrew Cook was found guilty on March 19, 1998, and was sentenced to death. He exhausted all his appeals, and the execution was scheduled for February 22, 2013. However, 3 days before the scheduled execution, Andrew's attorneys filed a clemency appeal, arguing that he was mentally unstable and required treatment. The State Board of Pardons and Paroles considered the appeal but ultimately voted against clemency. On February 22, 2013, Andrew Cook's family visited him in prison to bid their final farewell. Before his execution, he was granted the opportunity to choose his last meal, which consisted of a steak, baked potatoes, fried shrimp, lemon pie, and soda. As he lay strapped to a gurney in the death chamber, Andrew delivered his final words, expressing remorse for his actions. "I'm sorry," he said. "I won't ask you to forgive me, as I struggle to forgive myself." He then thanked his family for their unwavering support and apologized for the pain he had caused them, stating, "I'm sorry I took so much from you all." At 11:08 p.m., the lethal injection was administered. 14 minutes later, Andrew Cook, 38, was pronounced dead. Following the execution, Mary Hendrickson, the mother of one of the victims, expressed relief that justice had finally been served after 18 long years. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Aya Hashim. The Hashim family moved to the UK from Lebanon in November 2011, seeking a safer and more promising future. Aya's father, Ismail, wanted his children to have a good education and become valuable member of society. He applied for asylum for himself and his family, and after receiving a residence permit, they settled in Blackburn. Aya was a driven and ambitious young woman with big plans for her life. She was a law student at Salford University. Tragically, her parents' hopes for a better life were shattered when Aya was killed in a senseless act of violence. On May 17, 2020, Aya left her house to go to a nearby supermarket at around 3 p.m. However, she never returned home. About an hour later, Aya's father went out to look for her. Aya's mother searched online and discovered the news that a woman had been shot in their neighborhood. Soon after, Aya's parents received the devastating news that their daughter had been killed in the shooting. Aya was walking on King Street when a car drove by with multiple occupants. One of the individuals in the car fired 2 shots, one of which fatally hit Aya. 19-year-old Aya Hashim was fatally shot on King Street and died the same day despite medical efforts. The police do not think the incident was motivated by racism or religious hatred. Deputy Chief Terry Woods is seeking the public's help in gathering evidence. He asks anyone with dashcam footage or surveillance cameras to come forward if they have recordings of a green Toyota Avensis car or any suspicious activity. According to Deputy Chief Woods, Aya was an innocent bystander who was shopping for her family when she was accidentally caught in the crossfire. The shooting involved a green Toyota Avensis car. Witnesses report that 2 rounds were fired from the vehicle, and sadly, Aya was hit. Later that day, police discovered the Toyota Avensis car involved in the shooting abandoned near the scene of the crime. They also obtained CCTV footage of the incident. The footage shows that at 3:03 p.m. Aya is walking along the sidewalk. The Toyota mentioned earlier drives past her. The rear side window on the left is down. The shooter makes a fatal shot. The bullet goes through her and hits the pole. For ethical reasons, the police did not reveal footage of she falling to the ground. After reviewing the video recording, it's clear that there were at least 2 individuals in the car, the driver and the shooter. Following the shooting, the perpetrators quickly fled the scene and abandoned the vehicle on a nearby street. Within 2 hours, the police located the car and initiated a search for its owner. Aya Hashim was caught in the crossfire of a shooting incident that occurred near Khan's car wash. Following her death, the police launched a massive operation to apprehend the suspects, who had fled the UK, with the assistance of international law enforcement. 8 individuals were initially charged in connection with her death. Aya's death was ultimately determined to be a tragic accident. She was an innocent bystander. The shooting was actually a targeted attack on the owner of Khan's car wash, who was a competitor of Pharaoh Suleiman. It was Suleiman who allegedly hired a hitman to take out Khan, but the bullet mistakenly hit Aya instead. According to the video recording, at the time of the incident, Aya was standing a few feet away from a pole. The first bullet fired missed its intended target and hit something near a man, as evidenced by the splashing water. The key point here is that the shooter made a mistake. The person they aimed at was not the business owner, but rather an employee who was mistaken for Khan. During the second shot, Aya was positioned between the shooter and the employee. The bullet struck her in the left side of her chest, passed through her body, and then hit the pole. The car immediately fled the scene. The car wash owner, Khan, witnessed Aya falling to the ground and rushed to her aid, calling emergency services in the process. He described the events, stating that he had seen the car and the gun, and then the assailant sped away. According to him, they returned and started shooting, aiming the gun at him, which left him confused. To better understand the crime, let's examine the roles of the individuals involved. We'll start with the mastermind, Pharaoh Suleiman. Pharaoh Suleiman was a successful businessman with a loving family. Suleiman owned a thriving tire shop that had gained significant popularity over time. The business provided him with a substantial income, enabling him and his family to live a comfortable life. He was also active on social media, frequently sharing photos of himself driving expensive cars, giving his followers a glimpse into his life. When his business began to decline, he devised a plan to eliminate his competitor, Khan. Despite being a potential suspect due to his motive, Suleiman went ahead with the plan. He enlisted the help of Ayaz Hussein, Zamir Raja, and Anthony Ennis. The perpetrators conducted a surveillance mission the day before the crime, driving near the car wash to inspect the area. Additionally, Abu Bakr Saisha purchased the Toyota used in the crime with money provided by Suleiman. Kashif Manzur ensured the car was in working condition by performing technical checks and addressing any malfunctions. Uthman Saisha and his girlfriend, Judy Chapman, played a supporting role in the crime. They drove the shooter and driver to the location of the Toyota in their Ford Fiesta and then picked them up after the crime was committed, they abandoning the Toyota on a nearby street. According to the inquest, at 1:14 p.m., Judy Chapman and Uthman Saisha picked up Raja and Ennis from Bolton and drove them 13 miles to Blackburn, where the Toyota was parked. Kashif Manzur made sure the Toyota was ready as all four men drove to Blackburn. However, when they stopped a couple of miles from the car wash, the Toyota wouldn't start due to a dead battery. Manzur jumped the battery using another car's battery and some wires. With the car started, Manzur handed it over to Raja and Ennis, then returned to the service station where Suleiman was waiting, watching from a front row seat to see what would happen. The Toyota approached the corner with its windows rolled down. Ennis and Raja circled the block several times, waiting for the perfect moment to act. They needed to be on the same side of the street as Khan's car wash. Meanwhile, Manzur and Suleiman were observing the situation unfold. On the fourth pass by the car wash, the Toyota slowed down. Coincidentally, Khan was on the street at that exact moment. However, the shooter, Zamir Raja, made a mistake and fired the first shot at a different employee, not Khan. Fortunately, the first bullet missed its target. But the second bullet hit Aya. Following the shooting, Raja and Ennis fled the scene, abandoning their vehicle and getting into a car with Judy Chapman and Uthman Saisha, who drove them away from Blackburn. When police reviewed the video of Suleiman's store, Ayaz Hussein entered the store. Suleiman signaled to the others who were aware of the incident to leave the room and go to the second floor. Abu Bakr Saisha, who had bought the Toyota involved in the crime, was sitting behind them. When Abu Bakr Saisha overheard the police radio mention that the perpetrator's car had been found, he immediately got up to discuss something with Suleiman. 9 days after Aya's murder, Zamir Raja, the shooter, fled to Portugal and met Anthony Ennis, the driver of the Toyota, at Lisbon Airport. Both men had escaped the country. Meanwhile, the police were arresting the individuals involved in the crime. Pharaoh Suleiman, the mastermind, was arrested on May 18, the day after Aya's murder. Abu Bakr Saisha was arrested on May 19, and Judy Chapman and Uthman Saisha were arrested on May 20. Ayaz Hussein and Kashif Manzur were arrested on May 21. Zamir Raja, who had hoped to return to England without being detected, was arrested at a London train station on June 6. Anthony Ennis was caught in Spain on July 4 and extradited to the UK. Aya Hashim was murdered and Khan, the owner of a car wash, was nearly killed in a violent crime. Several suspects were charged, and at first, all of them denied any involvement. However, as the investigation continued and the pressure mounted, their stories began to contradict each other as they tried to downplay their roles in the crime. As the suspects' testimonies became more inconsistent, they started to turn on each other, revealing crucial details about the crime to the police. Each suspect tried to avoid a long prison sentence by blaming the others. On August 5, 2021, the court delivered its verdicts, resulting in severe sentences for all those involved. Pharaoh Solon, who had a prior conviction for a fatal hit-and-run incident in 2001, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years. Raja, the shooter, was also given a life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years. According to reports, he was paid $500 for his involvement in the crime. The driver, Anthony Ennis, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 33 years. Ayaz Hussein, who orchestrated the crime, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 32 years. Abu Bakr Saisha, who bought the getaway car, will serve at least 28 years. Uthman Satatya, who arranged for the shooter and driver to be transported, will also serve at least 28 years, and Kashif Manzoor, who made sure the car was working on the day of the crime, will serve at least 27 years. The judge was critical of the defendants, stating that they showed no regret for their actions after the shooting. Instead of taking responsibility, they tried to deceive and manipulate their way out of trouble. When that failed, they turned on each other in an attempt to save themselves. Judy Chapman was found guilty in October 2021 of involuntary deprivation of life. She was given a 15-year prison sentence for driving the car involved in the crime. However, investigators have since discovered that other individuals were involved in the crime. This was revealed through analysis of communication between the convicted parties. Louis Otway, a 42-year-old from Manchester, was sentenced to life in prison on May 5, 2023, with a minimum term of 32 years. During his trial, evidence revealed that Otway acted as an intermediary between Ayaz Hussein, Zamir Raja, and Anthony Ennis. Specifically, he assisted Hussein in committing a crime. Another person, Banbridge, was also involved in the case. She was the 10th person to be found guilty. Prosecutors said that Banbridge met with Raja and Ennis in Bolton, took their phones, and turned them off. Then, she drove to Trafford and turned the phones back on in different locations, making it seem like Raja and Ennis were in Greater Manchester, not Blackburn, when a shooting happened. This was done to create a fake alibi for the two men. Banbridge, 32, admitted to conspiracy to pervert the course of justice and was sentenced to 23 months in prison on August 11, 2023. This was the last conviction in the case of Aya Hashim. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Isabella Rodriguez. Isabella Rodriguez was born in Colombia in 1975 and moved to Florida with her family in the 1990s. They obtained U.S. residency and eventually citizenship in 2002, when Isabella was 27. She married William Hellman, but they divorced in 2015 after a decade together. Isabella then met Louis Bennett online, and they began a romantic relationship. In 2016, Isabella and Louis had a daughter named Amelia. 6 months later, they purchased an apartment in Delray Beach, a city on Florida's Atlantic coast. They married the following month, in February 2017. At the time, Isabella worked as a real estate agent, and Louis owned a small solar panel company. On April 30, 2017, Isabella flew to the Caribbean island of St. Martin to meet Louis, leaving their 9-month-old daughter with relatives. They planned to spend a week on the water, returning home to Florida on Louis's sailing catamaran. After stopping in the British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, they arrived in Cuba, where they stayed for a few days. On May 14, the catamaran set sail from Varadero, Cuba, bound for Florida. Isabella called her sister 3 hours later to say she would be home the next day. At around 1 a.m., Lewis sent out a distress signal to the U.S. Coast Guard, reporting that his ship had collided with an unknown object and was sinking. He also reported that his wife, Isabella, was missing. A Coast Guard helicopter crew located Lewis in a life raft around 4 a.m. and took him to Key West Island, the southernmost part of Florida. The catamaran was found floating upside down at dawn, but had not yet sunk. During an interview with investigators, Lewis explained that he and Isabella took turns keeping watch. At the time of the accident, it was Isabella's turn, and Lewis was asleep in his stateroom. He woke up to the sound of the collision and rushed on deck, but couldn't find Isabella. He called out her name, but she didn't respond. Lewis suspected that the loose mast might have knocked her overboard. Lewis also stated that the last time he saw Isabella, she was wearing a life jacket. When he was rescued, a Coast Guard rescue swimmer noticed that Lewis's backpack was unusually heavy. Upon inspection, officers found 225 collectible coins in the backpack, but their origin was unclear. Isabella Hellman went missing on May 15, prompting a 4-day search and rescue operation by the Coast Guard. As no signs of her were found, the operation was officially ended on May 18. The authorities were suspicious when Lewis Bennett, Isabella's husband, requested a letter from the Coast Guard stating that his wife was presumed dead just 24 hours after the search had ended. The Coast Guard denied the request, as it was outside their jurisdiction to issue such a certificate. 6 days later, Lewis announced on TV that he was traveling to Cuba to rent a boat and continue the search for his wife on his own. However, just 3 days after making this statement, Lewis claimed to have already returned from Cuba and met with Isabella's sister, saying he had checked hospitals but found no signs of her. Lewis expressed his despair and resignation to the situation, stating he was struggling to accept that his wife might be gone. He described Isabella as his soul mate and someone he thought he would be with forever. The next day, Lewis and the police attempted to retrieve his daughter from his wife's family, but they refused to relinquish her. Lewis ultimately took custody of his daughter with the help of the police, despite the scandal surrounding him. During the dispute, Isabella's sister repeatedly accused Lewis of being responsible for Isabella's death. Lewis's calm behavior and actions after his wife's disappearance raised suspicions among both Isabella's family and the police. Investigations revealed that Isabella and Lewis had frequent arguments after the birth of their child. Family, friends, and neighbors all confirmed this. Isabella had confided in loved ones that Lewis wanted to move to Australia, but she was opposed to leaving the United States. On May 30th, Lewis gave an interview in which he denied any involvement in his wife's disappearance. He claimed they had plans for a happy life together, but now he was alone and their daughter would grow up without a mother. While investigating Isabella's disappearance, the police also looked into the origin of valuable coins found among Lewis's belongings. It was discovered that Lewis had previously worked as a first mate on a yacht. The captain of that yacht had a collection of 617 rare coins worth around $100,000, which was discovered a year earlier. While the yacht was unoccupied and docked in the Caribbean, thieves broke in and stole the coins on board. Although the perpetrator was not caught at the time, the yacht's captain later identified the coins found on Lewis Bennett as part of the stolen loot, now that the FBI was investigating their origin. This new information led the FBI to obtain a search warrant for Lewis's apartment. Previously, 225 coins had been found among his belongings when he was rescued. On June 16, 2017, the search of his apartment uncovered an additional 162 gold coins hidden in a closet. Meanwhile, Lewis had relocated to England, where his parents lived, and had taken his daughter with him. However, due to financial difficulties, he returned to the United States and settled into an apartment valued at $125,000, while also receiving insurance payments for a lost catamaran. On August 28, 2017, Louis Bennett was arrested in Florida and charged with stealing coins. He pleaded not guilty. A few days later, a federal judge set his bail at $250,000, which Louis was unable to pay. As a result, he remained in custody while awaiting trial. Additionally, Louis attempted to have his wife declared dead. Louis benefited from his wife Isabella's disappearance by gaining control of their shared property and bank accounts. However, the judge refused to declare Isabella dead twice, as the investigation into her disappearance was ongoing. In a separate case, Louis pleaded guilty to stealing coins and transporting them to the United States in November 2017. Louis's parents asked the judge to be lenient when sentencing him, citing the fact that his daughter had already lost her mother. In February 2018, Louis received a sentence of 7 months in prison followed by 3 years of probation. On the same day, Louis was charged with second-degree murder in Isabella's death. Authorities believed he intentionally caused the catamaran they were on to crash, which was allegedly a staged event to cover up the crime. The prosecutor's case was based on a claim that Louis wanted to inherit Isabella's wealth to pay off his debts and take their young daughter to live in Australia. Isabella had expressed fear of her husband in text messages a few months before her death, stating that she felt he no longer respected her. She expressed fear about returning home. In a message sent months before her disappearance, Isabella wrote, "If you no longer like or love me, let's resolve this immediately. It's sad how you treated me the entire time." An inspection of the catamaran before it sank revealed that the portholes below the water line were left open. The damage to the dual hulls seemed to originate from within the vessel, near the water line. The water line is the point where the surface of the water meets the hull of a floating vessel. An expert hired by the FBI analyzed photos and videos taken by the U.S. Coast Guard of the catamaran before it sank. The expert concluded that Louis's account of the events was not credible. The analysis suggested that the vessel did not sink due to accidental damage, but rather appeared to have been intentionally scuttled. A professor of nautical architecture and ocean engineering at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy testified in court that the Coast Guard found no evidence of a collision that could have caused the catamaran to sink. Divers inspecting the vessel were cautious due to the risk of collapse, and eventually, the catamaran sank to a depth of over 4,000 feet, preventing a detailed inspection. 2 years after Isabella Hellman's disappearance, a judge officially declared her dead. Palm Beach County Circuit Judge Scott Suskauer issued a series of orders stating that Isabella was presumed to have died on May 14, 2017. Despite the passage of time, Isabella's body has not been found, and she has not contacted her family. Based on the available evidence, it is presumed that Isabella is deceased. The statement said, "In January 2019, U.S. District Judge Federico Moreno suspended Louis's February sentencing hearing in Miami and rescheduled it for May 28, saying he would not act until Isabella's family could personally visit her daughter Amelia, who turned 3 in July. In November 2019, Louis pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and the second-degree murder charge against him was dropped. Before the plea deal, he faced a possible life sentence for second-degree murder, but the new charges limited his maximum sentence to 8 years in prison. According to a document filed with the court, Louis claimed he didn't remember what he was doing when he discovered his wife was missing. He didn't search for her on the catamaran or in the water, nor did he use flares to signal for help. Instead, Louis packed his belongings onto a life raft and then intentionally damaged the catamaran to make it flood, allowing him to escape on the raft. Prosecutors stated that Louis waited 45 minutes after realizing his wife was missing to call for help. Notably, the U.S. Attorney's Office pointed out that Louis was an experienced sailor with training in emergency procedures, having previously sailed from St. Martin to Australia. Don't understand why he failed to use his knowledge to respond to the emergency situation. prosecutor states that Lewis admitted to being negligent in handing over control of the catamaran to his inexperienced wife, Isabella, resulting in her falling overboard and drowning. Despite being an experienced sailor with a Royal Yachting Association certification, Lewis failed to ensure Isabella wore proper safety gear. In contrast, Isabella had no formal sailing training or experience, and Lewis knew it. Lewis received training in emergency procedures, including man overboard protocols and night sailing safety, but Isabella did not. The prosecutor notes that only Lewis knows the full story of what happened on the catamaran that night. Following Lewis' guilty plea, Isabella's family, through their lawyer, expressed their immense pain and asked Lewis to show remorse. They stated that while Lewis can never undo the harm caused by taking Isabella away, he continues to cause additional pain by depriving them of contact with his and Isabella's daughter, Amelia. Isabella Hellman's family is grieving and missing her dearly. Although they have had limited contact with her daughter Amelia through 3 FaceTime calls, they have not been able to see or hug her in a long time. They long to be reunited with Amelia and provide her with love and care. As a part of their family, they want to be with her. They urged Lewis Bennett to do the right thing. Lewis Bennett, Isabella's husband, was sentenced to 8 years in prison on May 28, 2019, after pleading guilty to manslaughter in connection with her death. During his sentencing hearing, Bennett apologized sincerely to Isabella's family for putting them through immense pain. He acknowledged that his actions led to a devastating tragedy, for which he is truly remorseful. Lewis admitted to making poor decisions that worsened the situation. He expressed regret in federal court in Miami, where he waived his right to appeal as part of his plea bargain. Before the judge delivered the sentence, Lewis requested the opportunity to be released from prison early so that he could continue to care for their daughter, Amelia. Lewis expressed a desire to care for his daughter, saying, "I want to raise her in a way that honors my late wife's wishes." However, the judge ruled against him, sentencing him to 8 years in prison followed by 3 years of supervised release. As a result, Amelia will remain with her paternal grandparents in England for the time being. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Natasha Cournoyer. Natasha Cournoyer, 37 years old, has gone missing suddenly and without any notice. She didn't visit her mother, respond to phone calls, or return home. As the day went on, it became clear that none of her friends or colleagues had seen her either. Her worried relatives reported her missing at 5 p.m., prompting a police investigation. Natasha worked as a public relations specialist for the Correctional Service of Canada. Detectives began by interviewing her co-workers. Upon arrival, they found her car still parked nearby. A nervous-looking man, Michel Trottier, was standing by her vehicle. He claimed to be in a relationship with Natasha and was trying to figure out where she might have gone. The back door of Natasha's car had scratches, but it was unclear if they were related to her disappearance. With no reason to suspect Michel Trottier of involvement, detectives continued their investigation. Co-workers reported that Natasha was at work on October 1, 2009, the day before she vanished. She seemed to be in a good mood, friendly, and untroubled, with no signs of anything amiss. On October 2, Natasha needed a day off to deal with issues related to her recently deceased father's tombstone. To make up for time, she worked longer hours on October 1 and left the office around 8 p.m. According to her friends, Natasha was a kind and open person with no known conflicts or enemies. The police launched a large-scale search for Natasha, involving aviation and canine units. Initially, they focused on the area around the parking lot but found no clues to aid the investigation. Natasha's friends and relatives distributed flyers with her photo, hoping someone might have information about her disappearance. The first few hours after a person goes missing are crucial in finding witnesses or evidence. However, in Natasha's case, valuable time was lost because the police weren't notified until the evening of October 2nd, 21 hours after she left work. The search for Natasha took place from October 3rd to 5th, but unfortunately, no leads were found. Her family offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could help locate her. Natasha's boyfriend, Michel Trottier, suspected she had been kidnapped and made a televised plea for her safe release. Meanwhile, the police were investigating their personal lives. They had been together for 4 years, but their relationship had been rocky, with multiple breakups and reconciliations. The police explored all possible scenarios surrounding Natasha's disappearance. They reviewed CCTV footage from her workplace, both inside and outside the building. The footage showed Natasha arriving at 9:04 a.m. and leaving at 8:07 p.m. She had parked her car in a poorly lit area of the parking lot, and the cameras captured her walking towards it. However, she eventually disappeared from view due to the darkness. After a few minutes, the car headlights turned on and the car started moving, but instead of heading towards the exit, it drove to the opposite side of the parking lot, which was also poorly lit. The car stopped and the headlights went out. The vehicle remained in this position for about 20 minutes before moving towards the exit. It was determined that this car was not Natasha's, as she owned a Mazda. Further investigation revealed that the car in the video was a Ford Windstar minivan, which had entered the parking lot at 6:35 p.m. and parked next to Natasha's car. Based on the video footage, the police concluded that Natasha Conoyer's disappearance was likely a kidnapping. On the 5th day of the search, October 6, 2009, the focus shifted from finding a missing person to investigating a homicide. Natasha's body was discovered in a vacant lot in the Point Au Trumbull area, approximately 20 miles from her workplace. The body was located next to a dirt road that led to the riverbank. The news of Natasha's death devastated her relatives and friends, who were further disturbed by the medical examiner's report. According to the report, Natasha's cause of death was strangulation. Additionally, she had suffered 9 facial injuries, including a broken nose, and had marks on her wrists and ankles indicating that she had been bound. Seminal fluid was also found inside her body, which would serve as a source of DNA evidence. While awaiting DNA analysis results, detectives attempted to identify the owner of a minivan captured on camera the day Natasha vanished. In 2009, there were 2 motels near Natasha's workplace. On October 16, 2009, 10 days after her body was discovered, police visited both motels to review guest registration cards. At the Lido Motel, they found a guest who had registered a Ford Windstar. The guest was 48 years old Claude LaRouche, a registered sex offender with 2 prior convictions. In 1993, Claude was sentenced to 1 year in prison and 2 years of probation for coercing a 19-year-old acquaintance into sex. In 2005, he received a 40-month prison sentence for attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old girl. She managed to escape and run to a neighbor's house. Claude's 40-month sentence for the attempted kidnapping of a child raises questions about the severity of his punishment. In November 2008, Claude was released and started working as a carpenter. He married a woman with 2 sons, and they all lived together in a house about a 10-minute drive from where Natasha Conoyer disappeared. Detectives found out Claude checked into a motel the night Natasha went missing. Forensic experts examined the motel room and discovered dark red stains on the carpet, which they sent for analysis. The same day, detectives visited Claude at his home. Since he had a prior prison record, the police already had his DNA on file. However, they needed time to compare it to the DNA found on Natasha's body. Claude claimed he didn't know Natasha but admitted to frequently visiting the Lido Motel because it was cheap. He told the detectives he was unhappy with his intimate life with his wife and often rented a motel room to meet women offering paid sex services. When asked about his whereabouts on October 1st, the day Natasha disappeared, Claude said he couldn't remember anything, including staying at the Lido motel. He attributed his memory loss to excessive substance use, but his memory partially returned soon after. On November 5, 2009, a month after the body was discovered, detectives returned to Claude LaRouche's house. This time, however, it was not for a conversation. DNA analysis revealed that the seminal fluid found in Natasha Conoyer's body matched LaRouche's. Additionally, Natasha's DNA was detected in the motel room Claude rented and inside his car. Montreal police say there's no link between the crime and Conoyer's job at Correctional Service of Canada, and the victim didn't know the suspect. Following Claude's arrest, Montreal Police Inspector Daniel Rousseau stated that citizens could now feel safer in public. The news of the arrest shocked Claude's neighbors, who described him as a friendly and polite individual. The next day, on November 6, 2009, Claude LaRouche became a suspect in Natasha Conoyer's case. Initially, he denied any wrongdoing, but faced with substantial evidence, he confessed to taking Natasha's life. However, he claimed her death was accidental and not intentional. During his 2011 trial, two differing accounts of the events emerged, one from Claude and his defense team, and the other from the prosecution. According to Claude's testimony, he was waiting in a parking lot for a drug dealer on the evening in question. While sitting in his car, Natasha appeared beside him. He then attacked her, forced her into his vehicle, and shut the door. Afterwards, Claude conversed with Natasha, and she allegedly agreed to accompany him to a motel. Claude LaRouche experienced memory lapses, which left him unable to recall why he stood in the parking lot for 20 minutes or what he did during that time. However, he conveniently remembered specific moments that worked in his favor. According to LaRouche, Natasha offered to satisfy his demands in exchange for her freedom while they were in the motel room. He agreed, but after she fulfilled his requests, they got into an argument. Claude lost control, attacked Natasha, and ultimately strangled her. He then cleaned the room, moved her body to his car, drove home, and went to bed. The next morning, after the substances he had taken wore off, he realized the gravity of his actions. Claude chose to get rid of Natasha's body. As he drove to the location where the body was later found, he cut her documents and bank cards into pieces and threw them out the car window. However, it's crucial to remember that this account comes from LaRouche himself, and the more he shared, the more inconsistencies and questions emerged about his claims. According to Claude's testimony, the day after disposing of Natasha's body, he returned to the scene and covered her with a blanket, fearing she would freeze. He revisited the body again the next day to retrieve the blanket, worried that it would hinder her discovery. LaRouche's statements suggest that his actions were influenced by a clouded consciousness, leading to illogical decisions. He claimed he did not intend to take Natasha's life, which he attempted to convey to those present during the trial. The prosecution's case relied on physical evidence and a witness testimony. The witness stated that while walking his dog near the parking lot on the day Natasha disappeared, he saw Claude attempt to attack a jogger around 7 p.m. However, Claude retreated when he noticed the witness and his dog. Natasha Conoyer was attacked an hour later. The prosecutor was convinced that Claude had bound and abducted Natasha, taking her to a motel where she ultimately lost her life. In June 2011, Claude LaRouche was found guilty and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During the trial, it was revealed that just 2 weeks after Natasha's murder, Claude attempted to strangle another woman, Dominique Martel. However, she managed to fend him off by biting his finger. As a result, Claude was deemed a dangerous offender under Canadian law, rendering his prison sentence indefinite and significantly reducing his chances of early parole. Natasha had a peaceful and fulfilling life, with aspirations and objectives, all of which were brutally taken away by a man with a history of serious crimes. Despite his past, Claude was allowed to roam free, living among the community without adequate supervision. The fact that he had previously attempted to kidnap a 7-year-old girl raises questions about how he was able to reintegrate into society without proper monitoring. Natasha's loved ones continue to grapple with these unanswered questions, haunted by the thought that if the system had functioned correctly and Claude had been held accountable, Natasha might still be alive today. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Jessica Patel. Jessica Patel was born on September 16, 1983, in Leeds, West Yorkshire, England, where she grew up in a traditional Hindu community. As the eldest child, she developed a diligent and obedient nature from a young age. Jessica excelled academically, helped with household chores, and maintained a bright and cheerful personality. Jessica had a large social circle, but she was particularly close to a boy 3 years her senior, who was more reserved and shy. They often spent time together, and as Jessica matured, she blossomed into a beautiful young woman. Like many of her peers, she longed to find true love and build a happy family, much like the characters in her favorite movies. However, her romantic aspirations did not detract from her intelligence and determination. To achieve her goals, Jessica pursued higher education. In 2002, she enrolled at De Montfort University in Leicester, and 4 years later, she began studying pharmacy at the University of Manchester. There, she reconnected with Mitesh, an acquaintance who coincidentally attended the same faculty. They initially had no romantic feelings for each other, but over time, it turned into true love. This relationship has helped Mitesh grow and become more confident in himself. He is also accumulating knowledge and becoming more mature. Mitesh was extremely kind and caring towards Jessica, showering her with compliments and gifts. However, their happiness was short-lived. Jessica's mother passed away due to an incurable illness, leaving her devastated. Mitesh stood by Jessica's side, providing emotional support and comfort during this difficult time. As a result, their bond grew stronger. Jessica confided in her sister that she had finally found a trustworthy partner. Mitesh seemed perfect in every way, and she envisioned a happy marriage. In 2008, Mitesh asked Jessica's father for permission to marry her, following traditional Hindu customs. Although her father had reservations about Mitesh and felt that they were too young to get married, Jessica convinced him otherwise. They eventually got married in July 2009. The wedding was held in the beautiful garden of the bride's home. Initially, the newlyweds, Mitesh and Jessica, seemed like a perfect couple. However, things took a turn for the worse soon after. Mitesh's behavior changed dramatically. He became distant and cold, leaving Jessica feeling lonely. Their intimate life also suffered, and they didn't have any physical relationship for about 10 months after their wedding. This was very distressing for Jessica, who couldn't understand why Mitesh's feelings towards her had changed so drastically. Jessica tried to find fault in herself, wondering if she was the reason for Mitesh's change in. Meanwhile, she had just graduated from university in 2010 and was looking forward to starting her career as a pharmacist. She has a good education and a promising career. However, Mitesh's attitude continued to deteriorate. He became increasingly controlling and suspicious, constantly monitoring Jessica's every move. In February, her family suffered another grief. Her grandfather falls ill, his health begins to decline rapidly, and death seems inevitable. Manal's husband does not allow Jessica to spend much time with her family. This was the root of the conflict between they. When Manal confronted her husband about this, he became angry and responded by punching her in the face. As a result, when her grandfather was seriously ill, Jessica was only able to visit him a few times. Jessica comes from a traditional Indian family where his word is the law, restricting her from making her own choices. She felt trapped in a lonely marriage. One day, she confided in her family about her concerns. She expressed her suspicion that her husband, Mitesh, was being unfaithful. She noticed that whenever he received a phone call, he would excuse himself to another room. Additionally, he often stayed up late, spending hours alone, which further fueled her doubts. In 2012, Jessica's suspicions about her husband's infidelity were confirmed when she discovered romantic messages on his phone. Seeking help, she confided in Mitesh's cousin, with whom she had a good relationship. Instead of offering help or advice, the cousin blamed Jessica for her husband's behavior, implying that she was responsible for his infidelity. This response from Mitesh's cousin left Jessica feeling isolated and unsupported. To make matters worse, Mitesh also prohibited her from seeking comfort from her own sisters. It became clear that Mitesh was hiding something and trying to maintain his reputation and authority within the family and local community. In 2014, Mitesh and Jessica relocated to Lynor, a suburb of Middlesbrough in North Yorkshire, in an effort to start anew and distance themselves from their family. They purchased a large house, made renovations, and later opened their own pharmacy. Jessica had hoped that this fresh start would bring positive changes to their relationship. While their relationship did improve slightly, one thing was still missing: children. For 6 years, Jessica struggled with infertility, and Mitesh made veiled threats that he would leave her if she didn't become pregnant. In October 2015, she decided to go through in vitro fertilization. However, the initial attempts were unsuccessful, causing her to become increasingly anxious and depressed, especially with the added stress of hormone treatments. To make matters worse, Mitesh's behavior changed. He became distant and cold towards her at home. He would only show affection in public, and even then, it seemed superficial. He was often preoccupied with his phone, and the tension between them became unbearable. She reached her breaking point and suggested they separate, confessing that she was unhappy in the marriage. Mitesh's response caught her off guard. He claimed to love her and promised that things would improve over time. He even suggested that having a baby would strengthen their family bond. Jessica believed his words. For a moment she felt comforted and listened to, and her doubts subsided. On May 9, 2018, Mitesh and Jessica Patel received the exciting news that 3 of their embryos had been successfully fertilized, with a transfer scheduled for the following month. Jessica was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a mother and eagerly shared the news with her family. Tragically, their happiness was short-lived. A few days later, on the evening of May 14, 2018, Mitesh Patel made a frantic call to the emergency services, reporting that he had found his wife's body at their home. He claimed that he had left the house earlier to buy food and pick up his laptop from work. When he returned home, he found that the house had been burglarized and Jessica was lying unconscious on the living room floor. Mitesh told police that Jessica's skin was cold to the touch and there were bruises on her neck. He was clearly distressed, crying as he spoke. The police assured him that rescuers were on the way. When the officers arrived, they found Jessica's body on the living room floor, her wrists and ankles bound with duct tape. A grocery bag was nearby. Despite the medical team's efforts, Jessica died on the scene. The investigators sought to determine the motive behind the heinous crime. Upon examination, they found that the house had been thoroughly ransacked, with drawers and closets turned upside down. It was evident that the perpetrators had been searching for valuables, as they had even torn apart their bed mattress. The missing jewelry and cash further supported the notion that the primary motive was robbery. Jessica's husband, Mitesh, also believed that their house had been targeted by robbers. According to Mitesh's statement, on the day of the incident, he followed his usual routine, working a morning shift, going to the gym, and returning home afterward. His wife came home around 7 p.m. Later, Mitesh decided to order pizza and left the house at 7:44 p.m. Surveillance footage from a nearby pizzeria corroborated his alibi. Before leaving the pizzeria, He tried to call his wife to tell her he was on his way home, but no one picked up. Mitesh stopped at a pharmacy without notice, so he returned home later than expected. When Mitesh returned home at 8:50 p.m., he was met with a gruesome scene. His wife was bound, and their belongings were scattered everywhere. Neighbors was left reeling after the tragic event. This neighborhood is known as a wealthy and peaceful place, and has never had a crime before. The autopsy report revealed that Jessica's cause of death was strangulation, with the attacker using a bag, bare hands, and an electrical cord to ensure her demise. Since there were no signs of forced entry, investigators initially suspected that Jessica knew her attacker and had let them into the house. Jessica's family quickly arrived and comforted Mitesh, who appeared to be extremely sad and lost over the passing of his wife. However, the police had their suspicions, and a thorough search of the house uncovered some crucial clues that would eventually lead to the capture and trial of the perpetrator. A health monitoring app on Jessica's phone also played an important role in finding the truth. 3 days after Jessica's murder, the lead investigator contacted her father, who was still near the crime scene, and asked him and other relatives to return home so as not to interfere with the ongoing investigation. The investigator promised to provide more information later. Meanwhile, detectives were preparing to arrest the prime suspect in the case, Mitesh Patel. Several key pieces of evidence had led them to this conclusion. During the search of the crime scene, police found a damaged hard drive from a surveillance camera installed in front of the front door. The device was discovered in a suitcase under the bed. Further investigation uncovered a hidden photograph in their nightstand that showed Mitesh embracing another man named Amit. Additionally, footage from a camera across the street revealed that only Mitesh and Jessica entered and exited their home on the day of the murder, May 14th. The footage shows that Mitesh returned home at 3:30 p.m. Jessica arrived home from work at 7 p.m., and Mitesh left the house briefly to pick up pizza at 7:44 p.m., returning at 8:50 p.m. Since no one else was seen entering or leaving the house, the evidence pointed to one conclusion: Mitesh was the likely perpetrator. Mitesh was the prime suspect in the investigation, but the police lacked concrete evidence against him. As the detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a shocking secret that Mitesh had carefully kept hidden. Jessica had suspected that her husband was being unfaithful, and her instincts were correct. However, it was not what she expected. Mitesh was hiding his true sexual orientation. His marriage to Jessica was just a cover, a way to hide his true feelings for other men. 2 years into their marriage, Mitesh met Amit, an Indian man who was openly gay. Despite their cultural differences, they men quickly fell in love and secretly met each other whenever Mitesh was away on business. Unbeknownst to Jessica, her husband was leading a double life, pretending to be the perfect spouse while carrying on an illicit affair. In 2016, Amit moved to Australia, but Amit and Mitesh continued their relationship. Mitesh had had a plan to become same-sex parents with Amit by using Jessica's embryos and finding a surrogate. Mitesh had informed Amit that Jessica was having in vitro fertilization, IVF, and had asked if they could be together after this plan, to which Amit had replied that it would depend on the results. Mitesh confided in Amit, stating that eventually there would be no more obstacles in their relationship. In a message, Mitesh chillingly wrote, "Jessica's days are numbered." It was later discovered that Mitesh was secretly taking fertility-affecting medication to avoid intimate relations with Jessica. The investigation revealed that Mitesh's internet search history was reconstructed. He had searched for how to get rid of his wife, Hindu funeral, and procedure for obtaining insurance payments for the murder of a spouse. Notably, Jessica had a £2 million life insurance policy. After her death, Mitesh planned to claim the money and use it to buy a property in Australia. In the weeks leading up to Jessica's death, Mitesh had been actively searching for a new home, aiming to create a comfortable environment for his future family. Investigators analyzed their cell phones and found incriminating messages. They also discovered a fitness app that tracked the number of steps taken by Jessica's. The data showed that Jessica's phone had not moved since 8:04 p.m. However, 15 minutes later, the phone recorded 14 steps, suggesting that either Jessica had made her last movements or someone had moved the device. In contrast, Mitesh's phone data revealed high physical activity and an elevated heart rate in the period leading up to his wife's murder, which was unusual for him. Between 7:44 p.m. and 8:30 p.m., Jessica's husband, Mitesh, walked up and down the stairs multiple times, creating false evidence of a burglary by throwing objects around the house. Before calling 911, he went upstairs to conceal evidence, including a hard drive from a surveillance camera in the safe of the pharmacy he and his wife owned. During the police investigation, they found stolen jewelry, £25,000, and a couple of gold bars, which Mitesh claimed had been taken during the robbery. They also discovered a roll of duct tape similar to the one used to bind the victim's arms and legs. The torn end of the tape matched the piece taken as evidence from Jessica's body. To create an alibi, Mitesh had to go to his workplace the evening after the pizza party. Despite planning for years, he was remarkably careless and left a trail of evidence behind. Furthermore, DNA analysis found under Jessica's fingernails showed that it matched Mitesh's DNA. Mitesh had scratch marks on his neck, which he attributed to a fall. During the investigation and subsequent trial, Mitesh, the accused, denied any wrongdoing. He claimed that his interactions with Jessica were mere coincidence. The 3-week trial strung together the developments in the case. It was established that he attacked his wife as soon as she entered the house. She fought back and scratched the attacker but was eventually controlled. Initially, Mitesh had planned to kill his wife by administering the lethal dose of insulin. However, this method takes a long time to be effective and there is a risk that the plan will be discovered. To ensure a quicker outcome, Mitesh suffocated his wife by putting a bag over her head. To make sure his wife was dead, he strangled her with his hands and then used a rope. The prosecution presented physical evidence, including empty ampules found in Mitesh Patel's laptop bag, which linked him to the crime. Mitesh brutally murdered his wife, Jessica, in their home, a place they had shared for years. The entire ordeal took only 20 minutes. He then brutally tied her up to create the appearance that she had been robbed. Following the murder, Mitesh went about his day as usual, even stopping at a pizza place and calling Jessica's phone. The news of her death left both families in shock and disbelief. Tragically, Jessica had been seeking help in the months leading up to her murder, but her cries for aid were ignored. Only her sister seemed worried, but they couldn't do much to help either. The jury deliberated for 2 hours before delivering a guilty verdict. On December 5, 2018, the court sentenced Mitesh Patel to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Mitesh showed no remorse for his actions, and it seemed that the only person he felt sorry for was himself. The family was still grappling with the loss of Jessica's death, remembering her in their daily prayers and cherishing the happy moments they had shared together. It is unlikely that they will ever forgive Mitesh for his heinous crime. According to Hindu beliefs, her soul must be reborn. Since she suffered a lot in life and was unhappy but remained a good person, in the next incarnation, she will be rewarded. At least that was a comfort to her loved ones.